Welcome to MINDSHOCK. This is your host, Bruce McGuire, and we are finally tackling the Oklahoma City event conspiracy. Now, many believe that this is what actually started the snowball effect of many different conspiracies, false flags, etc., within the cult of statism and all the bootlickers that just eat it all up. Whatever they see on the idiot box, if it's the official narrative, they believe it. No matter how much evidence is stacked in the opposite direction. So we'll be taking a look at this event, how it ties to other events, all within the timeline of the statist cult known as the United States government. Attempting not to fall for any logical fallacies, unlike every other coverage out there. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Check the link in the description. Make sure to subscribe, like, and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. You could also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. Questions, comments, theories, thoughts, suggestions, rebuttals, debunkings of any kind, leave them in the comment section. Unless, of course, you are with us here live. Drop them in the live chat, and I will try to get to all of them. So what's actually kind of interesting is that even the Wikipedia, here in the 2020s, I mean, I don't know who's believing official narratives in the 2020s. Post-COVID, I mean, are there really that many coincidence theorist goofs out there that are still gobbling up official narratives on blind faith in the corrupt with nothing but track records of fraud and failure? I mean, it's weird. It's kind of weird. Statist goofs just have, it's like they have a glutton for humiliation. I mean, it's weird. Just looking at the scoreboard between coincidence theorists and conspiracy theorists, aka critical thinkers, aka non-bootleggers. I mean, it's just weird. The scoreboard's been such a blowout for so many decades now. And I think we could still find some goofs out there that believe the official narrative here. But the main question is, how deep do the rabbit holes go, and how much of a spider web is this event within the entire landscape of the statist cult and the goals of the New World Order, Agenda 2020, becoming Agenda 2021, becoming Agenda 2030, or 2050, whatever. Are they all pushing it back on purpose, or is it all part of the plan? In these staged pushing of the envelopes? Like, do the powers that be not really care what happened during COVID? They just record what happened, and then they have, plan A, B, C, D, depending on what happened. So is there like an alternate universe where all the patriots stood up and they toppled the cult of statism? Once, guys with guns started harassing women and children walking in a park for not staying home? I mean, was that the line in the sand in some kind of alternate universe? And did they have a plan for that? Was it just, martial law to finally usher in the New World Order? Now, I have to do another video on Jade Helm and the Obama conspiracy Jade Helm, where a few things have been coming out regarding that, because a lot of goofs hallucinate Alex Jones was wrong about it, but I'm not sure what happened there. There's some new evidence coming out that they had some grand events, but they didn't actually go through with it for a few different reasons. Now, shill or not, did Alex Jones simply wake up too many people? I don't know. I'm just asking the questions here because this is MINDSHOCK, where the only thing we know for sure is that we don't know anything for sure. So I'm just going to go through the wiki real quick for those that are new to this event. But what's curious is even the wiki has a fairly good outline of the conspiracy theories. But yeah, let's just go through the basics here, and then we will be doing our comprehensive deep dive, unlike anything else out there, exploring every avenue every rabbit hole and the spider webbing of them, because some of the most shocking so-called coincidences have yet to be reported on in the mainstream media or even alternative media. There's a few bombshells here. Yeah, bombshells that I haven't actually seen anywhere outside of obscure forums, which of course I am dialed into. So, here's the basic outline. April 19th, 1995, American anti-government extremist Timothy McVeigh, assisted by Terry Nichols, which Terry Nichols apparently has disappeared. I mean, there's a lot of info on him, but nobody really talks about him anymore. Detonated a makeshift bomb stored in a rental truck parked in front of the Alfred P. Murray Federal Building in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, in an act of domestic terrorism. The explosion killed 167 people, injured 684, and destroyed more than a third of the building. The attack also destroyed or damaged 324 other buildings, destroyed 86 vehicles, and it caused an estimated $652 million in damage. During rescue operations after the bombing, a rescue worker was killed after being struck on the head by falling debris, bringing the death toll to 168. Within 90 minutes of the explosion, McVeigh was stopped by Oklahoma Highway Patrolman Charlie Hanger, interesting name, for driving without a license plate and was arrested for illegal weapons possession. So, right off the bat here, I mean, someone has to raise an eyebrow here. And before we get into all the history regarding McVeigh, MK Ultra, all of these things, MK Ultra programmed operatives involved in so-called staged events. And again, for all the retard maxers out there, the illiterate Dunning-Kruger goofs, staged does not mean nobody died. I mean, just the lack of basic mental faculties from coincidence theorist bootleggers. Staged simply means it was an inorganic event. So anyway, yeah, before we get into all of that, like, if you're a critical thinker, immediately, what is driving, like, they didn't even like, a lot of times criminals will just, like, grab a plate from a junkyard or something, because they don't want to get stopped, right? Or they'll just swap a plate in the parking lot. I mean, they just bring a screwdriver and they just swap a plate with somebody else, or steal a plate, whatever, if they don't have one to swap. Like, if you're smart enough to do all of this, like, did he want to be caught by driving without a plate? Like, that's the first question here. If he is at a certain IQ level to plan and carry this all out, like, I mean, there are some really dumb criminals. I mean, even they are capable of swapping or stealing a license plate. But apparently he wasn't. Like, that's gotta raise an eyebrow. Perhaps not as much as indestructible passports on 9/11. You know, that's a curious one, but, you know, perhaps it's not quite that bad, but, you know, and the other thing, if this is all humiliation fetish for the powers that be, that they just put the most ludicrous narratives on the idiot box and they just cackle away as all the bootlicking coincidence theorists just believe it because it's on the idiot box. Like, dude, like, they probably think it's so funny that there's no shortage of brain dead goofs out there. They'll believe whatever's on the news. Indestructible passport paper, I mean, just anything. So, but anyway, that's gotta raise an eyebrow. Driving without a license plate, was arrested for illegal weapons possession. Now, is that even possible? If you have the Second Amendment, how can you illegally possess a weapon? If you have the right to bear an uninfringible right, meaning there's no possible restriction on that right. It's uninfringible. So, I mean, that's kind of interesting as well. I mean, is the arresting officer committing treason? And this is without even getting into whether or not you need a license plate. You could check out my statism podcast on that. I don't know if I want to get into that now, but this is, again, all Supreme Court affirmed and all of this. Welcome Da True 82 and Christopher Allen. Yeah, this case is far more than meets the eye, even far more than the basic conspiracy coverage. I mean, this actually goes so deep. This goes so deep, I think it's far beyond. I mean, I don't think even Alex Jones really covered the depth of this. I'm not even sure. Does he still talk about it? Because he still references 9/11, but I'm not sure how much he references this event. And a lot of people barely even know about it, which is curious as well. I mean, I'm not sure it's possible to understand the entire landscape of statist conspiracies and false flags and all of these things without covering this event. And, yeah, so, okay. Continuing on here, forensics evidence quickly linked McVeigh and Nichols to the attack. Within days, both men were charged. Meanwhile, cops can't even find people captured on CCTV committing regular crimes, yet within 9/11, they immediately knew who did it and how. And same thing here. It's just kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy. You would think, even in a reasonable universe where they know who did it, would they really publicly disclose all of it that quickly? Because in most cases, like, they're gathering all the evidence, they're seeing how many people are involved. But in a lot of these so-called suspicious events, they know who did it. They know there's no extra people involved, whether it's one guy or two guys or whatever. Like in Columbine, they claimed there were only two. Like, they discover all this immediately. Whereas, like, every other investigation in history, like, it takes weeks, months, possibly even years to truly investigate and explore every avenue and associates and all of this. But in these, should we call them just curious events, it's like they know everything already, and is that reason because it was all part of a script? We'll be examining that theory again. I do not claim anything is true or untrue for the triggered goofs out there. Michael and Lori Fortier were later identified as accomplices. Well, actually, so this is a deviation. They actually identified more accomplices. But they weren't charged? That's interesting. McVeigh, or were they charged later? McVeigh, a combat vet of the Gulf War, had rented a Ryder truck, which he later filled with explosives used in the attack. Nichols assisted McVeigh in planning the attack and making the bomb. McVeigh and Nichols were primarily motivated by their anger at the U.S. federal government, particularly in its handling of law enforcement sieges at Ruby Ridge in 92 and Waco in 93, as well as the 94 federal assault weapons ban. And we saw how, mass shootings exploded after that ban. And after gun-free zones started up in the early 90s, just the absolute explosion of mass shootings and school shootings since those bans. Okay, so Ruby Ridge and Waco, we're not going to be getting into... I need to do separate episodes on those because... I mean, those are crazy. Like in Ruby Ridge, they're trying to entrap a family man to buy like some kind of sawed-off shotgun, again, infringing on 2A because the barrel length is X amount of centimeters from this or that. Just the level of goofery involved in all of this is insane. The money and resources spent in trapping and then killing the dog. That was Art Roderick, the goof involved in the Maura Murray case. Supposedly shot their family dog at Ruby Ridge, and then they're killing their family members. I mean, if terrorists are attacking your property, I mean, who wouldn't defend themselves at costumed terrorists just descending on their home? I mean, it's just kind of weird. It's just kind of weird, the bootlickers. I mean, how is there a single person that thinks Ruby Ridge was even remotely justified in any way? They're treating a random family with a baby, as if there's some kind of, like, cartel or something. I mean, it's just insane. Like, all the money and resources, like, that could be going to the, all those unsolved crimes, which is pretty much all of them. So, yeah, just really wild stuff there. And Waco is its own category, because there's a lot of weird stuff with Waco. And so, this is all kind of coming to a head, so to speak, because Ruby Ridge is 92, Waco is 93. Then the federal assault weapons ban 94, and then this Oklahoma City event 95, almost as if it was all coordinated year after year after year. Interesting, coming on the heels of course, Behold a Pale Horse, Bill Cooper's book, one of the OGs. So McVeigh timed the retaliatory attack to coincide with the second anniversary of the end of the siege in Waco and the battles of Lexington and Concord, the first engagements of the American Revolutionary War. Curious. The official Federal Bureau of Investigation report on the bombing, referred to as OK Bomb, which is also interesting, that abbreviation, OK Bomb, as if it's okay to bomb, involved 28,000 interviews, 7,100 pounds of evidence, and nearly 1 billion pieces of information. When the FBI raided McVeigh's home, they found a telephone number that led them to a farm where McVeigh had purchased supplies for the bombing. The bombers were tried and convicted in 97. And that's a quick turnaround time, too, 95 to 97. I mean, there's still people who committed some, petty crimes, or, some kind of, shady drug deals or murders, and they're years and years in cases. McVeigh was sentenced to death. He was executed via lethal injection June 11th, 2001. At the U.S. Federal Penitentiary in Terre Haute, Indiana. Nichols was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. And interesting there, he's viewed as an accomplice. I mean, so he built the bomb that killed all these people, directly involved, but he's not sentenced to death. In response to the bombing, the U.S. Congress passed the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 96, which limited access to habeas corpus in the United States, among other provisions. Limited access. And habeas corpus, for those that don't know, it's a recourse challenging the reasons or conditions of a person's confinement under cover for law. A petition for habeas corpus is filed with a court that is jurisdiction of the custodian. If granted, a writ is issued. So that's kind of curious. So if the court is corrupt and incompetent, they limited the exposing of that. Which is very, very interesting. I mean, there's a very interesting set of circumstances around this event. And it's actually an interesting thought exercise. What if this event hadn't happened? So we could do a few different thought exercises. What if Ruby Ridge, Waco didn't happen, but the Oklahoma City event did? Or what if all three of them didn't happen? Would we be living in a completely different country, a country where freedom still exists? I mean, these are just very curious questions, aren't they? And at that point, even the most devout coincidence theorist bootlicker, if they have the mental capacity to do these basic thought exercises, again, as a further thought exercise, how would the country be different, and what would the powers that be, if they want total and complete control, what would they do to prevent a free country from occurring? Would they stage certain events? And those are very, very good questions, not for the mentally weak bootlickers and coincidence theorists. So it also passed legislation to increase the protection around federal buildings to deter future terrorist attacks. The bombing remains the deadliest act of domestic terrorism in U.S. history, and was the deadliest terrorist attack in U.S. history until the September 11th attacks. Planning chief conspirators Timothy McVeigh and Tara Nichols met in '88 at Fort Benning during basic training for the U.S. Army. McVeigh met Michael Fortier as his Army roommate. The three shared interests in survivalism. McVeigh and Nichols were radicalized by white supremacists and anti-government propaganda. And you know, it was an interesting piece of information here. Anti-government propaganda, is that just known as truth? Like basic common sense, is that what that is? Because technically, Thomas Paine's pamphlets, Common Sense, which led to the Revolutionary War, they were considered anti-government propaganda, but they were simply truth, right? I mean, it's almost comical to read like official narratives with this wording, just looking back through history, like who the good guys were, who the bad guys were, and the language that's used here to describe all of this. They expressed anger at the federal government's handling of the '92 Federal Bureau of Investigation standoff with Randy Weaver at Ruby Ridge, as well as the Waco siege, a 51-day standoff in '93 between the FBI and the Branch Davidian members that began with a botched Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms attempt to execute a search and arrest warrant. There was a shootout and ultimately a siege of the compound, resulting in the burning and shooting deaths of David Koresh and 81 others. In March '93, McVeigh visited the Waco site during the standoff, and again after the siege ended. He later decided to bomb a federal building as a response to the raids and to protest what he believed to be U.S. government efforts to restrict the rights of private citizens, especially those under the Second Amendment. So again, someone with this level of observational intelligence, they're going to forget a license plate? I mean, it's curious. McVeigh had stated that federal agents were acting like soldiers, thus making an attack on a federal building an attack on their command centers. McVeigh later said that instead of bombing a building, he had contemplated a campaign of individual assassination. Potential targets in this campaign included U.S. Attorney General Janet Reno and FBI hostage rescue team sniper Lon Horiuchi. He initially intended to destroy only a federal building, but later decided that his message would be more powerful if many people were killed in the bombing. McVeigh's criterion for attack sites were that the target should house at least two of the three federal enforcement agencies: the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives, the ATF, the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI, and the Drug Enforcement Agency, the DEA. You know what's weird regarding the ATF and DEA? That's kind of weird? Like, why is there even an ATF or DEA? I mean, you have the right to bear arms, uninfringible. I mean, and alcohol and tobacco, I mean, you're going to restrict free market capitalism, like people just transporting plants or grain or liquid derivatives of grain. It's kind of weird. And drug enforcement, I mean, other than people, involving, and selling anything to children, although look at all these corrupt companies selling like candy with like all these poisonous carcinogen ingredients and just all of this processed sugar, more addictive than heroin. I mean, it's kind of weird. It's kind of weird, the people that hallucinate this is all justified, this level of statist control. So, yeah. Anyway, continuing here with his, again, the alleged decisions that he made. He regarded the presence of additional law enforcement agencies such as the Secret Service or the U.S. Marshal Service as a bonus. As a resident of Kingman, Arizona, McVeigh considered targets in Missouri, Arizona, Texas, and Arkansas. He said his authorized biography that he wanted to minimize non-governmental casualties. So he ruled out Simmons Tower, a 40-story building in Little Rock, Arkansas, because a florist's shop occupied space on the ground floor. In December '94, McVeigh and Fortier visited Oklahoma City to inspect what would become the target of their campaign, the Alfred P. Murray Federal Building. The 9-story building, built in '77, was named for a federal judge and housed 14 federal agencies, including the DEA, ATF, Social Security Administration, and recruiting offices for the Army and Marine Corps. McVeigh chose the Murray Building because he expected its glass front to shatter under the impact of the blast. He also believed that its adjacent large open parking lot access across the street might absorb and dissipate some of the force and protect the occupants of nearby non-federal buildings. McVeigh also believed that the open space around the building would provide better photo opportunity for propaganda purposes. He planned the attack for April 19th, 95 to coincide with the second anniversary of the Waco siege and the 220th anniversary of the battles of Lexington and Concord, the first engagements of the American Revolutionary War. Rumors have alleged that the bombing was also connected to the planned execution of Richard Snell, Arkansas white supremacist who was a member of the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord, and the CSA, and who was due to be executed the day the bombing took place. Prior to his execution, Snell predicted that a bombing would take place that day. Interesting. I mean, you would think they would have access to his correspondence unless somebody, or even the correspondence of everybody in prison with him, right, that could have given him a verbal message or whatever. But yeah, though his execution was not confirmed to be a motive for the bombing, Fort Smith-based federal prosecutor Stephen Snyder told the FBI in May 95 that Snell wanted to blow up the Oklahoma City building as revenge for the IRS raiding his home. Okay. McVeigh and Nichols bought or stole the materials they needed to manufacture the bomb and stored them in rented sheds. In August 94, McVeigh obtained 9 binary explosive kinetics from gun collector Roger E. Moore in Arkansas, and with Nichols ignited the devices outside Nichols' home in Harrington, Kansas. September 30th, 94, Nichols bought 40 50-pound bags of ammonium nitrate fertilizer from Mid-Kansas Coop in McPherson, Kansas, enough to fertilize 12.5 acres of farmland at a rate of 160 pounds of nitrogen per acre, an amount commonly used for corn. Nichols bought an additional 50-pound bag on October 18, 94, and McVeigh approached Fortier and asked him to assist with the bombing project, but he refused. Again, this is the official narrative. McVeigh and Nichols then robbed Moore in his home of $60,000 worth of guns, gold, silver, and jewels, transporting the property in the victim's van. McVeigh wrote Moore a letter in which he claimed that government agents had committed the robbery. Items stolen from Moore were later found in Nichols' home and in a storage shed he had rented. I mean, at least he came up with a believable story. I mean, look at all those stories of government agents just stealing so much from private citizens randomly. In October 94, McVeigh showed Michael and his wife, Lori Fortier, a diagram he had drawn of the bomb he wanted to build. McVeigh planned to construct a bomb containing more than 5,000 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer mixed with about 1,200 pounds of liquid nitromethane and 350 pounds of Tovex. Including the weight of the 16 55-gallon drums in which the explosive mixture would be packed, the bomb would have a combined weight of about 7,000 pounds. McVeigh originally intended to use hydrazine rocket fuel, but it proved to be too expensive. McVeigh and his accomplices then attempted to purchase 55 U.S. gallon drums of nitromethane at various NHRA drag racing series events during the season. His first attempt was at the Sears Craftsman Nationals held at Heartland Motorsports Park in Pauline, Kansas. Worldwide Racing Fuels representative Steve Lesua, one of the 3 dealers of nitromethane, was at his unit when he noted a young man in fatigues wanted to purchase nitromethane and hydrazine. Another fuel salesman, Glenn Tipton of VP Racing Fuels, testified on May 1st, 97 about McVeigh's attempt to buy nitromethane and hydrazine. After the event, Tipton informed Wade Gray of Texas Allied Chemical, a chemical agent for VP Racing Fuels, who informed Tipton of the explosiveness of a nitromethane and hydrazine mixture. McVeigh, using an assumed name, then called Tipton's office. Suspicious of his behavior, Tipton refused to sell McVeigh the fuel. The next round of the NHRA Championship Tour was the Chief Auto Parts Nationals at the Texas Motorplex in Ennis, Texas, where McVeigh posed as a motorcycle racer and attempted to purchase nitromethane on the pretext that he and some fellow bikers needed it for racing. However, there were no nitromethane-powered motorcycles at the meeting, and he did not have an NHRA competition license. Lesueur again refused to sell McVeigh the fuel because he was suspicious of McVeigh's actions and attitudes, but VP Racing Fuels representative Tim Chambers sold McVeigh 3 barrels. Chambers questioned the purpose of the 3 barrels when typically no more than 5 gallons would be purchased by a Top Fuel Harley rider, and the class was not even raced that weekend. McVeigh rented a storage space in which he stockpiled 7 crates of the 18-inch long Tovex sausages, 80 spools of shock tube, and 500 elastic blasting caps, which he and Nichols had stolen from a Martin Marietta Aggregates quarry near Marion, Kansas. He decided not to steal any of the 40,000 pounds of ANFO, ammonium nitrate fuel oil, he found at the scene, as he did not believe it was powerful enough. He did obtain 17 bags of ANFO from another source for use in the bomb. McVeigh made a prototype bomb that was detonated in the desert to avoid detection. Think about the people as if they were stormtroopers in Star Wars. They may be individually innocent, but they are guilty because they work for the evil empire. That's a quote from McVeigh, reflecting on the deaths of victims in the bombing. Later, speaking about the military mindset in which he went about his preparations, he said, quote, "You learn how to handle killing in the military. I faced the consequences, but you learn to accept it." End quote. He compared his actions to the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki rather than the attack on Pearl Harbor, reasoning it was necessary to prevent more lives from being lost. April 14th, 1995, McVeigh paid for a room at the Dreamland Motel in Junction City, Kansas. The next day, he rented a 93 Ford F700 truck from Ryder under the name Robert D. Kling, an alias he adopted because he knew an Army soldier named Kling with whom he shared physical characteristics, and because it reminded him of the Klingon warriors in Star Trek. On April 16th, he and Nichols drove to Oklahoma City, where he parked a getaway car, a yellow 77 Mercury Marquis, several blocks from the Murray Federal Building. The nearby Regency Towers Apartments lobby security camera recorded images of Nichols' blue 84 GMC pickup truck on April 16th. After removing the car's license plate, he left a note covering the VIN and said, quote, "Not abandoned. Please do not tow. Will move by April 23rd. Needs battery and cable," end quote. Both men then returned to Kansas. That's, wow, interesting. Did he think that note would be respected? Because nowadays, obviously, people would just laugh at that note. Nobody gives a crap about nothing, but yeah, welcome Tom Rossland in the chat here. Yeah, this one's going to be a doozy, so I hope everybody's comfortable. This is going to be a long one. We got so much to go over here. April 17th to 18th, 1995, McVeigh and Nichols removed the bomb supplies from their storage unit in Harrington, Kansas, where Nichols lived, and loaded them into the Ryder rental truck. They then drove to Gary Lake State Park, where they nailed boards on the floor of the truck to hold the 13 barrels in place and mixed the chemicals using plastic buckets and a bathroom scale. Each filled barrel weighed nearly 500 pounds. McVeigh added more explosives to the driver's side of the cargo bay so he could detonate the bomb with his Glock 21 pistol in case the primary fuses failed. During McVeigh's trial, Lori Fortier stated that McVeigh claimed to have arranged the barrels in order to form a shaped charge. This was achieved by tamping, placing material against explosives opposite the target of the explosion. The aluminum side panel of the truck with bags of ammonium nitrate fertilizer to direct the blast laterally towards the building. Specifically, McVeigh arranged the barrels in the shape of a backwards J. He later said that for pure destructive power, he would have put the barrels on the side of the cargo bay closest to the Murray building. However, such an unevenly distributed 7,000-pound load might have broken an axle, flipped the truck over, or at least caused it to lean to one side, which would have drawn attention. All or most of the barrels of the ammonium nitrate nitromethane mixture contained metal cylinders of acetylene intended to increase the fireball. Acetylene intended to increase the fireball and brisance of the explosion. The use of a Ryder truck and the bomb material was an extremely similar technique used in the 93 World Trade Center bombing, and it's been proposed they were inspired by the event to replicate their use of a truck and similar bombs in the Oklahoma bombing. Yeah, we need to do an episode on the 93 World Trade Center attempted bombing, because there's a lot of question marks regarding that event as well. Lot of question marks there. McVeigh then added a dual fuse ignition system accessible from the truck's front cab. He drilled 2 holes in the cab of the truck under the seat, while 2 more holes were drilled in the body of the truck. 1 Grand Canyon fuse was run through each hole into the cab. These time-delayed fuses led from the cab through plastic fish tank tubing conduit to 2 sets of non-electric blasting caps, which would ignite around 350 pounds of the high-grade explosives that McVeigh stole from a rock quarry. The tubing was painted yellow to blend in with the truck's livery and duct taped in place to the wall to make it harder to disable by yanking from the outside. The fuses were set up to initiate through shock tubes the 350 pounds of Tovex Blastrite gel sausages, which would in turn set off the configuration of barrels. Of the 13 filled barrels, 9 contained ammonium nitrate and nitromethane, and 4 contained a mixture of the fertilizer and about 4 U.S. gallons of diesel fuel. Additional materials and tools were used for manufacturing the bomb were left in the truck to be destroyed in the blast. After finishing the truck bomb, the 2 men separated. Nichols returned home to Harrington, and McVeigh traveled with the truck to Junction City. The bomb cost about $5,000, equivalent to about $11,000 in 2025 to make, which is pretty crazy, because that's not really all that expensive, considering war efforts, etc. Bombing. McVeigh's original plan had been to detonate the bomb at 11 a.m., but at dawn, April 19th, 95, he decided instead to destroy the building at 9 a.m. As he drove toward the Murray building in the Ryder truck, McVeigh carried with him an envelope containing pages from the Turner Diaries, a fictional account of white supremacists who ignite a revolution by blowing up the FBI headquarters at 9:15 one morning using a truck bomb. McVeigh wore a printed t-shirt with Sic Semper Tyrannis, thus always to tyrants, which, according to legend, Brutus said during the assassination of Julius Caesar, and is also claimed to have been shouted by John Wilkes Booth immediately after the assassination of Abe Lincoln. And, quote, the tree of liberty must be refreshed from time to time with the blood of patriots and tyrants, end quote, from Thomas Jefferson. He also carried an envelope full of revolutionary materials and included a bumper sticker with a slogan falsely attributed to Thomas Jefferson, quote, when the government fears the people, there is liberty. When the people fear the government, there is tyranny, end quote. Underneath, McVeigh had written, quote, maybe now there will be liberty, exclamation point, end quote, with a hand-copied quote by John Locke asserting that a man has a right to kill someone who takes away his liberty. McVeigh entered Oklahoma City at 8:50 a.m. At 8:57 a.m., the Regency Towers Apartments lobby security camera that had recordings of Nichols' pickup truck 3 days earlier recorded the Ryder truck heading towards the Murray Federal Building. At the same moment, McVeigh lit the 5-minute fuse. 3 minutes later, still a block away, he lit the 2-minute fuse. He parked the Ryder truck in a drop-off zone situated under the building's daycare center, exited and locked the truck. As he headed to his getaway vehicle, he dropped the keys to the truck a few blocks away. I mean, this is pretty crazy too. I mean, just even imagining like what's going through his head. Like, you're lighting the fuse while being in the vehicle. That's crazy. That's crazy. Let me put an aerial shot here so everybody can see this. So here's an aerial shot. I mean, that's pretty crazy damage. I mean, that was a heck of a bomb. Welcome Walt Chamberlain and Austin MP in here. At 9:02 a.m., the Ryder truck containing over 4,800 pounds of ammonium nitrate fertilizer, nitromethane, and diesel fuel mixture detonated in front of the north side of the 9-story Alfred P. Murray building. In total, 168 people were killed, hundreds more injured. 1/3 of the building was destroyed by the explosion, which created a 30-foot wide, 8-foot deep crater on Northwest 5th Street next to the building. The blast destroyed or damaged 324 buildings within a 4-block radius and shattered glass in 258 nearby buildings. The broken glass alone accounted for 5% of the death total and 69% of the injuries outside the Murray Federal Building. The blast destroyed or burned 86 cars around the site. The destruction of the building left several hundred people homeless and shut down several offices in downtown Oklahoma City. The explosion was estimated to have caused at least $652 million worth of damage. And one of the biggest questions people ask is, like, why didn't he pick, like, New York, LA, Chicago, like a major city with a far higher population? And we'll actually get to that. The effects of the blast were equivalent to over 5,000 pounds of TNT, could be heard and felt up to 55 miles away. Seismometers at the Omniplex Science Museum in Oklahoma City, 4.3 miles away, and in Norman, Oklahoma, 16.1 million miles away, recorded the blast measuring 3.0 on the Richter magnitude scale. The collapse of the northern half of the building took roughly 7 seconds. As the truck exploded, it first destroyed the column next to it, designated as G20, and shattered the entire glass facade of the building. The shockwave of the explosion forced the lower floors upward before the 4th and 5th floors collapsed into the 3rd floor, which housed a transfer beam that ran the length of the building and was being supported by 4 pillars below, as well as supporting the pillars that hold the upper floors. The added weight meant that the 3rd floor gave way, and then the transfer beam, which in turn caused the collapse of the building. Initially, the FBI had 3 hypotheses about responsibility for the bombing: international terrorists, possibly the same group that had carried out the World Trade Center bombing; a drug cartel carrying out an act of vengeance against the DEA agents in the building's DEA office; and anti-government radicals attempting to start a rebellion against the government. McVeigh was arrested within 90 minutes of the explosion as he was traveling north on Interstate 35 near Perry in Noble County, Oklahoma. Oklahoma State Trooper Charlie Hanger stopped McVeigh for driving his yellow 77 Mercury Marquis without a license plate and arrested him for having a concealed weapon. For his home address, McVeigh falsely claimed he was a resident at Terry Nichols' brother James's house in Michigan. After booking McVeigh into jail, Trooper Hanger searched his patrol car, found a business card which had been concealed by McVeigh after being handcuffed. Written on the back of the card, which was a military surplus store in Antigua, Wisconsin, there were the words, "TNT at $5 a stick, need more." The card was later used as evidence during McVeigh's trial. And again, would a criminal mastermind leave that in his pocket on that day? Would a criminal mastermind drive without a license? Some people believe it wasn't even McVeigh that was there. And we'll get into that later. At the building, not necessarily, obviously he was where he got arrested. Supposedly, anyway. While investigating the VIN on the axle of the truck used in the explosion and the remnants of the license plate, federal agents were able to link the truck to a specific rider rental agency in Junction City, Kansas, using a sketch created with the assistance of Eldon Elliott, the owner of the agency. The agents were able to implicate McVeigh in the bombing. McVeigh was also identified by Liam McGone of the Dreamland Motel, interesting name there, right? Dreamland, who remembered him parking a large yellow Ryder truck on the lot. McVeigh had signed in under his real name at the motel. That's also interesting, isn't it? Would a criminal mastermind do that? Using an address that matched the one on his forged license and the charge sheet at the Perry police station. Before signing his real name at the motel, McVeigh used false names for his transactions. So that's kind of curious. So he uses false names, but for whatever reason, he uses his real name at the motel. McGone noted people are so used to signing their own name that when they go to sign a phony name, they always almost go to write and then look up for a moment as if to remember the new name they want to use. That's what McVeigh did, and when he looked up, I started talking to him, and it threw him. Seriously? This criminal mastermind military man is going to get thrown and accidentally sign his real name just because someone said something? It's kind of weird. I mean, again, depending on the level of the MK Ultra, maybe it's not weird. Maybe there's some kind of an innocent phrase or a common phrase that triggers personality switching. Again, if that's what happened to him, and if he was an MK Ultra, I do not claim anything is true or untrue. After April 21st, 95, court hearing on the gun charges, but before McVeigh's release, federal agents took him into custody as they continued their investigation into the bombing. Rather than talk to investigators about the bombing, McVeigh demanded an attorney. Having been tipped off by the arrival of police and helicopters that a bombing suspect was inside, a restless crowd began to gather outside the jail. McVeigh's request for a bulletproof vest or a transport by helicopter were denied. But authorities did use a helicopter to transport him from Perry to Oklahoma City. Federal agents obtained a warrant to search the house of McVeigh's father, Bill, after which they broke down the door and wired the house and telephone with listening devices. FBI investigators used the info gained along with the fake address McVeigh had been using to begin their search for the Nichols brothers, Terry and James. April 21st, 95, Terry Nichols learned that he was being hunted and turned himself in. Investigators discovered incriminating evidence at his home: ammonium nitrate and blasting caps, the electric drill used to drill out the locks at the quarry, books on bomb making, a copy of Hunter, an '89 novel by William Luther Pierce, the founder and chairman of the National Alliance, a white nationalist group, and a hand-drawn map of downtown Oklahoma City on which the Murray building and the spot where McVeigh's getaway car was hidden were marked. So he didn't destroy any of that after the fact? After a 9-hour interrogation, Terry Nichols was held in federal custody until his trial. April 25th, 95, James Nichols was also arrested, but he was released after 32 days due to lack of evidence. McVeigh's sister, Jennifer, was accused of illegally mailing ammunition to McVeigh, but she was granted immunity in exchange for testifying against him. A Jordanian-American man traveling home from his home in Oklahoma City to visit family in Jordan on April 19, 95 was detained and questioned by the FBI at the airport. Several Arab-American groups criticized the FBI for racial profiling and the subsequent media coverage for publicizing the man's name. Attorney General Reno denied claims that the federal government relied on racial profiling, which FBI Director Louis J. Free told a press conference that the man was never a suspect and was instead treated as a witness to the bombing who assisted the government's investigation. International reaction. International reactions to the bombing varied. President Clinton received many messages of sympathy, including those from Queen Elizabeth II of the UK, Yasser Arafat of the Palestine Liberation Organization, and P.V. Narasimha Rao of India. Other condolences came from Russia, Canada, Australia, the United Nations, and the European Union, among other nations and organizations. Several countries offered to assist in both the rescue efforts and investigation. France offered to send a special rescue unit. Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin offered to send agents with anti-terrorist expertise to help in the investigation. President Clinton denied Israel's offer, believing that accepting it would increase anti-Muslim sentiments and endanger Muslim Americans. The aftermath: within 48 hours of the attack and with the assistance of the General Services Administration, the GSA, the targeted federal officers were able to resume operations in other parts of the city. According to Mark Potok, director of intelligence project at the Southern Poverty Law Center, his organization tracked another 60 domestic, smaller-scale terrorist plots from 95 to '05. Several of the plots were uncovered and prevented, while others caused various infrastructure damage, deaths, and other destruction. Potok revealed that in '96 there were approximately 858 domestic militias and other anti-government groups, but the number had dropped to 152 by 2004. Shortly after the bombing, the FBI hired an additional 500 agents to investigate potential domestic terrorist attacks. A 2005 FBI report said that the bombing brought the threat of right-wing terrorism to the forefront of American law enforcement's attention. And again here, that's actually kind of crazy. If there were 858 militias in '96, so if you have knowledge of all these rising militias and that there might be a real threat to the statist cult, if you want to maintain the statist cult, do you orchestrate events in order to shut down the militias? Just a question. Again, I'm not claiming anything is true or untrue. Just a question. Welcome, Les Xylophone. Legislation. In the wake of the bombing, U.S. government enacted several pieces of legislation, including the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of '96. In response to the trials of the conspirators being moved out of state, the Victim Allocution Clarification Act of '97 was signed March 20th, '97 by President Clinton to allow the victims of the bombing and the victims of any other future acts of violence the right to observe trials and to offer impact testimony in sentencing hearings. Clinton stated that when someone is a victim, he or she should be at the center of the criminal justice process, not on the outside looking in. In the years since the bombing, scientists, security experts, and the ATF have called on Congress to develop legislation that would require customers to produce an ID when purchasing ammonium nitrate fertilizer and for sellers to maintain records of its sales. Critics argue that farmers lawfully use large quantities of fertilizer, and as of 2009, only Nevada and South Carolina require ID from purchases. In June '95, Congress enacted legislation requiring chemical taggants to be incorporated into dynamite and other explosives so that the bomb could be traced to its manufacturer. In 2008, Honeywell announced that it had developed a nitrogen-based fertilizer that would not detonate when mixed with fuel oil. The company got assistance from the Department of Homeland Security to develop the fertilizer for commercial use. It uses ammonium sulfate to make the fertilizer less explosive. Interesting. Impact. According to McVeigh believed that the bomb attack had a positive impact on government policy. In evidence, he cited the peaceful resolution of the Montana-Freeman standoff in '96, the government's $3.1 million settlement with Randy Weaver and his surviving children 4 months after the bombing, and April 2000 statements by Bill Clinton regretting his decision to storm the Branch Davidian compound. McVeigh stated, quote, "Once you bloody the bully's nose and he knows he's going to get punched again, he's not coming back around," end quote. Yeah, I don't know about all that. That's kind of weird. He actually thinks, because the government only got more powerful since then, with more widespread surveillance and all of that. Trials and sentencing of the conspirators. FBI led the official investigation known as OK Bomb, with Weldon L. Kennedy acting as a special agent in charge. Kennedy oversaw 900 federal, state, and local law enforcement personnel, including 300 FBI agents, 200 officers from Oklahoma City Police Department, 125 members of the Oklahoma National Guard, and 55 officers from the Oklahoma Department of Public Safety. The crime task force was deemed the largest since the investigation into the assassination of John F. Kennedy. OK Bomb was the largest criminal case in American history, with FBI agents conducting 28,000 interviews, amassing 3.5 short tons of evidence, collecting nearly 1 billion pieces of info. Federal Judge Richard Paul Match ordered that the venue for the trial be moved from Oklahoma City to Denver, ruling that defendants would be unable to receive a fair trial in Oklahoma. The investigation led to the separate trials and convictions of McVeigh, Nichols, and Fortier. What's interesting is that Stephen Jones, one of McVeigh's attorneys, Jones believed McVeigh was part of a larger conspiracy and sought to present him as the designated patsy. According to the Wikipedia, McVeigh disagreed with Jones, arguing that rationale for his defense. After a hearing, Judge Match independently ruled the evidence concerning a larger conspiracy to be too insubstantial to be admissible. In addition to arguing that the bombing could not have been carried out by two men alone, Jones also attempted to create reasonable doubt by arguing that no one had seen McVeigh near the scene of the crime, and the investigation into the bombing had only lasted 2 weeks, which are great points. Jones presented 25 witnesses over a 1-week period, including Frederick Whitehurst, a chemist and attorney, and a supervisory special agent in the FBI. So this guy worked in labs, etc. Whitehurst described the FBI's sloppy investigation of the bombing site and its handling of other key evidence. June 2nd, 97, McVeigh found guilty on 11 counts of murder and conspiracy, and sentenced to death. May 2001, the Justice Department announced that the FBI mistakenly failed to provide over 3,000 documents to McVeigh's defense. That's a slight oversight. Wow. June 6th, federal judge Match ruled the documents would not prove McVeigh innocent, ordered the execution to proceed. It's kind of weird, though, whether they would or wouldn't. I mean, clearly that's not a fair trial. If there's all these investigatory documents, like, what if McVeigh really was a patsy? What if this? I'm not saying that was the case, but if it was, like, how are you gonna? That's kind of weird. George W. Bush approved the execution. The execution was transmitted on closed-circuit television so that relatives of the victim could witness his death. McVeigh's execution was the first federal execution in 38 years. Nichols stood trial twice. He was first tried by the federal government in 1997, found guilty of conspiring to build a weapon of mass destruction and of 8 counts of involuntary manslaughter of federal officers. After he was sentenced June 4th, 1998 to life without parole, the state of Oklahoma in 2000 sought a death penalty conviction on 161 counts of first-degree murder, 160 non-federal agent victims, and 1 fetus. For all the goofs that hallucinate that only born humans can be murdered. On May 26, 2004, the jury found him guilty on all charges, but deadlocked on the issue of sentencing him to death. Presiding Judge Stephen W. Taylor then determined the sentence of 161 consecutive life terms without the possibility of parole. March 2005, FBI investigators acting on a tip from Gregory Scarpa Jr. searched a buried crawlspace in Nichols' former house and found additional explosives missed in the preliminary search after Nichols was arrested. Michael and Lori Fortier were considered accomplices for their foreknowledge of the planning of the building. In addition to Michael's assisting McVeigh in scouting the federal building, Lori had helped McVeigh laminate the fake driver's license that was later used to rent the Ryder truck. Michael agreed to testify against McVeigh and Nichols in exchange for a reduced sentence and immunity for his wife. He was sentenced May 27, 1998 to 12 years in prison, fined $75,000 for failing to warn authorities about the attack. January 20th, 2006, Michael was released from prison, transferred into WITSEC, and given a new identity. Conspiracy theories. Several conspiracy theories have been proposed regarding the bombing in 95. These theories reject all or part of the official government report. Some of these theories focus on the possibility of additional co-conspirators alongside McVeigh and Nichols that were never indicted, or additional explosives planted inside the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building. John Doe number 2 was no John Doe number 2 was ever identified, and the government never openly investigated anyone else in conjunction with the bombing, although the defense teams in both McVeigh's and Nichols' trials suggested that others were involved. Judge Stephen W. Taylor found no credible, relevant, or legally admissible evidence of anyone other than McVeigh and Nichols having directly participated in the bombing. When McVeigh, this propaganda spin is hilarious, just really groveling at the official narrative. When McVeigh was asked if there were other conspirators in the bombing, he replied, quote, "You can't handle the truth, because the truth is, I blew up the Murray building. And isn't it kind of scary that one man could wreak this kind of hell," end quote. And again, was it one man? Because he had at least one accomplice, even officially. So for the goofs that hallucinate that him saying that means he was a lone wolf, when clearly there's another guy convicted here. Not just one other guy, you also have Michael Fortier. So yeah. On the morning of McVeigh's and of course, if he was MK Ultra and it was all part of the plan, etc. On the morning of McVeigh's execution, a letter was released in which he had written, quote, "For those diehard conspiracy theorists who will refuse to believe this, I turn the tables and say, show me where I needed anyone else. Financing, logistics, specialized tech skill, brainpower, strategy. Show me where I needed a dark, mysterious Mr. X," end quote. And again, is it really about that? Or, well, again, we'll get into that as well. But that aside, logistics aside, if he was MK Ultra'd into doing this in the first place, that's evidence of a mass conspiracy, if that's true. And also programmed to say that. Or not programmed, if depending on which personality of his was active. So that's the general rundown from the wiki. Les Xylophone in the chat says, Dwayne Fusilier and Janet Reno conspired with the Clintons and the WEF in the 90s to infiltrate and demonize militias and to restrict gun rights. McVeigh was sheep-dipped and he isn't dead. If you pay attention, it's the same as Columbine. Multiple witnesses saw other actors, sloppy investigation, German-speaking suspects who had their pit. I didn't know about the German-speaking suspects in Oklahoma City. I don't know. Let me get into. Welcome, Sarah Catherine. Let me get into here. We're going to get into the nitty gritty here. Give me a second to cue these up. There's been 2 documentaries made on this. We're gonna go over both of them here, because this is gonna be a long one, because we want to cover every angle here. Even with multiple episodes, these are gonna be pretty long. So hold on a second here. So there's yeah, I don't know what I want to go over first here. We have 2 documentaries here: Secret Life of Timothy McVeigh and A Noble Lie, Oklahoma City 95 documentary. And then there's also a very interesting interview. Let's go with The Secret Life of Timothy McVeigh first, from the Corbett report. I think this guy actually blocked me on Twitter. I forgot even over what, but highly emotional goof. But obviously some excellent reporting here. So fair use here. This is going to be a great overview, but this only scratches the surface. Like, we have so much to go over here, but this will set the stage for sure. Fair use here.
You're listening to the Corbett Report.
Basically, there are 4 elements that I have to receive information regarding.
South of this address, are you going to check on that? 179, that's affirmative. We
Marks the worst U.S. terrorist attack in history, the bombing of the Alfred P. Murrah building in downtown Oklahoma City.
The explosion shook central Oklahoma, killed nearly 170 people, and injured more than 400 others.
Someone had detonated a Ryder truck filled with explosives outside the building.
The only suspect actually charged in the bombing so far is Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh, the Oklahoma City bomber, the face of American terrorism, the face of evil. On the morning of April 19th, 1995, the Alfred P. Murrah building was torn apart by explosions, killing 168. Office workers, passers-by, children in the building's daycare center. Horrified, a nation in grief turned to the authorities for answers. Now, 20 years after that tragic day, we all know the story the public was told.
Less than a week away now from the 20th anniversary of the Oklahoma City bombing. It's still the largest act of domestic terrorism our country has ever seen.
At approximately 8:40 in the morning on April 19th, 1995, a slow-moving Ryder truck was seen near the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City.
A Ryder truck loaded with a diesel fuel and fertilizer bomb blew up next to the Alfred P. Murrah Federal Building, cutting it in half. 168 people, including 19 children in its daycare center, died.
There you can see as the building was just simply cut away by this huge explosion.
Collapsed into a shifting house of cards. Pulling at the rubble, they sometimes wonder whether they're tugging the piece that holds it all up.
The nationwide search for suspects in the Oklahoma City bombing.
The government has claimed McVeigh was alone. Terry Nichols was later also arrested and convicted as an accomplice.
The plot was said to be an attempt to avenge the deaths of about 80 people in the government siege at the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, exactly 2 years earlier.
And that story quickly centered on one man.
Timothy James McVeigh was born April 23, 1968, in Pendleton, New York.
Him in his neighborhood got to be pretty well known for being kind of an attention getter, an outgoing type kid.
For Timothy McVeigh, guns would become a lifelong passion.
McVeigh's decision to join the Army in 1988 comes after high school and a series of dead-end jobs. With his love of guns, this is a natural fit for him.
He and his unit, parts of the 1st Infantry Division, the Big Red One, were sent to the Gulf and were in place, ready for war, by January 1991. When the war ended, his unit was part of the security force assigned to guard General Norman Schwarzkopf in Saudi Arabia.
McVeigh says several key events caused him to, in his words, snap. Beginning in 1992, when federal agents killed the wife and young child of white supremacist Randy Weaver during a standoff at Ruby Ridge, Idaho.
A call for an imminent war with the government.
You know, it's weird, too, watching a lot of this news coverage, propaganda, and their phrasing. It's very telling how they want to shape the narrative, like constantly referring to people as white supremacists. Like, it's just kind of weird because, for example, they don't refer to, like, Zionists as Israeli supremacists. It's just the framing of the narrative, and again, as if a supremacist can't be peaceful or not a criminal. Like, you can believe whatever you want. It's kind of a weird, you know, just so obvious the way the propaganda works.
Spreads to cell groups across the far right. Timothy McVeigh also becomes convinced by this time. Shortly thereafter, he writes Michael and Lori Fortier, telling them that he wanted to take action against the government. He then enlists the help of his old Army buddy, Terry Nichols. The Regency Tower security cameras photograph McVeigh's Ryder truck passing by on his way to the Murrah building.
One of the individuals believed to be responsible for Wednesday's terrible attack on the Murrah Federal Building in Oklahoma City has been arrested.
A highway patrol officer pulled over Timothy McVeigh less than 2 hours after the bombing for a missing license plate.
In 1997, McVeigh was found guilty on 11 federal counts of murder and conspiracy. He was sentenced to death and executed in 2001.
Timothy McVeigh. We've been told so much about him. What he did, why he did it, what it meant for America. But how much of it is true? For 20 years, a handful of tireless researchers have been working to expose the lies surrounding the legend of Timothy McVeigh, the lone wolf terrorist mastermind. And what they have uncovered has been remarkable. These researchers are not isolated cranks, but U.S. Air Force weapons experts, Oklahoma State representatives, FBI whistleblowers, government informants, attorneys, eyewitnesses, veteran journalists, and many others whose direct experience contradicts the narrative of the OKC bombing that we have been told. But perhaps the most compelling contradiction of the official story comes from McVeigh himself. According to the official account, McVeigh had set his sights early on in his military career on joining the Special Forces, and it was the frustration of not achieving that goal that caused him to quit the forces suddenly and unexpectedly in 1991.
During his stay at Fort Riley, Kansas, McVeigh had been selected to try out for the Special Forces, the exclusive Green Berets, his dream assignment in the military.
And had trained extensively for it, doing hundreds of push-ups and hundreds of sit-ups every day, carrying 100 pounds of gear 13, 15 miles a day to get himself in the physical condition for the course. The Gulf War changed that for him.
Sergeant Timothy McVeigh was awarded the Bronze Star for Valor and the Combat Infantry Badge for his part in the fighting. When the war ended, his unit was part of the security force assigned to guard General Norman Schwarzkopf in Saudi Arabia. Suddenly, he was told to return to the United States. His long-desired wish to try out for the Special Forces, his revered Green Berets, had finally become a reality.
He was getting everything ready. He was happy. He was excited. He was moving, because he was going to the Special Forces.
1 week later, Sergeant Timothy McVeigh was at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, undergoing the strenuous Special Forces tryout. But he was not the soldier he had been before the war in the Gulf.
After living in the desert for 4 months, he was physically drained, particularly the desert conditions. His equipment was wore out.
One of the tests was for him to carry a 45-pound sack with him on a long journey. He was wearing new boots, his ankles were aching, his body and mind were physically out of shape.
His feet were blistered, his ankle was sprained.
At that point, McVeigh knew he could not pass the physically grueling Special Forces tests. It was the most devastating thing that had ever happened to him.
And he sent a written notice to the camp supervisor, a voluntary statement of withdrawal. It reads, "I am not physically ready."
It was his first failure in the military.
What's also curious, which I don't know if they're going to talk about this here, is what he was exposed to over there. Like what kind of gases and chemicals and because there's a lot of stories about that too. We're not going to go into a deep dive here, but and not just chemical agents that caused physical issues, but also mental issues on whatever they were doing, you know, testing various different types of weapons over there that had never been disclosed. That definitely needs to be its own podcast.
And his buddies saw an altered McVeigh when he returned from that experience. He was somebody who had succeeded in everything in the military before. Now he had failed, and he seemed somewhat embittered and soured.
But in a letter to his sister in October 1993, published in the New York Times in 1998, McVeigh tells a very different story. Why would Tim, characteristically non-drinker, super successful in the Army, private to sergeant in 2 years, Top Gun, Bronze Star, accepted into Special Forces, all of a sudden come home, party hard, and, just like that, announce he was not only disillusioned by the Special Forces, but was in fact leaving the service? He goes on to answer, "Now here's what led to my current life. It all revolves around my arrival at Fort Bragg for Special Forces. We all took intelligence, psychological, adeptness, and a whole battery of other tests, out of a group of 400. One day in formation, 10 social security numbers were called out, no names, and told to leave formation. Mine was one. The 10 of us were told that out of the select group of 400, we had scored highest on certain tests. We had been selected because of our intelligence, physical makeup, and physical abilities. We were to feel special, part of a hand-picked group. We were all asked to volunteer, talk about peer pressure, to do some work for the government on the domestic as well as international front. What I learned next, both from the briefings and from the questions and private talks, included 1. We would be helping the CIA fly drugs into the US to fund many covert operations, and 2. Military consultants were to work hand in hand with civilian police agencies to quiet anyone who was deemed a security risk. We would be government-paid assassins." How did the New York Times address these startling claims in a feature-length article on the letter? A single parenthetical remark. The government has always denied such activities. This is a remarkable claim, to be sure, but the question should not be whether or not this version of events has always been denied in an unattributed way by an unidentified representative of an unidentified government agency, but whether or not there are facts to back up the claim. So what evidence can we find in the public record that would shed light on the question of whether or not McVeigh was, in fact, still in the military at the time he wrote the letter? And, if such information exists, how does it change the story of the Oklahoma City bombing?
Well, and another point, too, this article all these years later, I mean, Steven Seagal already blew the whistle on CIA trafficking drugs in Above the Law before it was all publicly discussed and all of that. So this has been public knowledge for many, many years, but the New York Times, I don't know if anybody views them as a legitimate newspaper anymore. I mean, it's kind of weird.
Firstly, it makes sense to ask whether or not such a claim is even possible. Does the military engage such task forces of undercover operatives to carry out off-the-record missions? The answer to that question is yes. That answer comes from a number of sources, including Colonel L. Fletcher Prouty. As a colonel in the U.S. Air Force and Chief of Special Operations for the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Prouty worked from 1955 to 1964 as the liaison procuring military supplies, equipment, and logistics support for CIA special operations worldwide. In his 1973 tell-all, The Secret Team, Prouty discussed the inner workings of America's intelligence community, noting, "Sheep-dipped is an intricate Army-devised process by which a man who is in the service as a full-career soldier or officer agrees to go through all the legal and official motions of resigning from the service. Then, rather than actually being released, his records are pulled from the Army personnel files and transferred to a special Army intelligence file. Substitute, but nonetheless real-appearing records are then processed, and the man leaves the service. He is encouraged to write to friends and give a cover reason why he got out. He goes to his bank and charge card services and changes his status to civilian, and does the hundreds of other official and personal things that any man would do if he really had gotten out of the service. Meanwhile, his real Army records are kept in secrecy, but not forgotten. This tactic was used for...
So this is quite the mind-shocking revelation for all the coincidence theorists. So even if all the coincidence theorists, for whatever reason, they don't believe McVeigh was one of these, the fact that these exist, I mean, that's a curiosity. How many statist bootlickers, aka coincidence theorists, the Dunning-Kruger crowd, like, how long can they deny that this is going on? Now, even if this is not accurate regarding McVeigh, again, I'm not claiming it is or it isn't, the fact that all of this exists, I mean, how can coincidence theorists make sense of this in their Stockholm Syndrome-like devotion to the state?
Example, in Project Heavy Green during the U.S. military participation in Vietnam in the 1960s. Restricted from deploying troops in Laos by the 1962 Geneva Accords, 48 Air Force personnel were instead sheep-dipped and deployed in Laos as civilian employees of Lockheed to service a bombing radar installation there. But was McVeigh sheep-dipped? By its very definition, this process is designed to be hidden from public view. Under such an operation, McVeigh's resignation, paperwork, even his personal life, would all look exactly as it should if he had genuinely been discharged from the military. Even more frustratingly, the sources of information that could potentially prove that McVeigh was in fact sheep-dipped are being deliberately kept from the public. Take the testimony of Terry Nichols. He is serving an unprecedented 161 consecutive life sentences for his part in the bombing at ADX Florence, a supermax prison in Colorado where he shares a cell block with Ramzi Youssev and Ted Kaczynski. In 2007, he provided a sworn deposition to attorney Jesse Trentadue where he stated, "In December of 1992, Timothy McVeigh told me that while he was serving in the U.S. Army, he had been recruited to carry out undercover missions." McVeigh again told the same story to one of his fellow inmates on death row, David Paul Hammer.
McVeigh told me and another inmate here that he was actually an agent working for a guy he called the Major, and he allegedly met this man when he reported to for special trainings duty, and he was told to wash out his special training and asked to accept what was called black ops operations, and he would be working as an independent person as a part of, and that he would recruit people to be in his unit.
Isn't it weird how the mainstream media never covers any of this? How the coincidence theorists pretend none of this evidence exists. The level of goofery of coincidence theorists who just stick their head in the sand and pretend none of this exists.
According to McVeigh, this association went on for several years, from the end of 1992, throughout the days of the bombing of the Murrah building on April 19, 1995.
Unsurprisingly, perhaps, the federal government has made it as difficult as possible for the general public to access this information or find out more about these claims. After granting the interview discussing McVeigh's military connections, Hammer was placed on lockdown and even prevented from contacting his attorneys. After receiving Nichols' sworn declaration that McVeigh was an undercover Army operative, attorney Jesse Trentadue was prevented from gaining access to depose Nichols by a federal judge. The judge in McVeigh's own case also placed sensitive documents obtained by the defense during discovery under seal, documents that the producer of Oklahoma City bombing documentary A Noble Lie claims prove these connections. So perhaps we can start with just laying out the parts of the record that we can all agree on about Timothy McVeigh and his background.
Well, he actually served in the U.S. Army. He was on the security detail for General Schwarzkopf, at the time the Allied Supreme Commander of Allied Forces in the first Persian Gulf War back in 1990. And he was a sharpshooter and a sniper. And he was commended, actually, when he was in custody in the Denver Federal Courthouse awaiting trial. The Army had to award him 2 medals of commendation for his stellar service. As far as the special forces, where it's still murky, we weren't able to find any documentation to support the fact that he did work special forces. But we do know that he was an employee by the CIA. He was a drug smuggler and a professional assassin. And this was in the 2.5 years leading up to the devastation of April 19, 1995. We also know that he was on a joint task force with the ATF and the FBI trying to recruit people to help him blow up federal buildings in 7 different cities around the United States.
What you have just said will be stunning to those who have only heard the mainstream narrative of McVeigh. So let's talk about the pieces of evidence that document what you're talking about.
We were able to go through the defense counsel records. Stephen Jones was very generous in giving us access to those records. They're stored at a particular institution on the campus of UT Austin. And through the hard work of Wendy Painting, one of our key researchers, oddly enough, she was born and raised less than an hour from where McVeigh was raised in upstate New York. But she had paid several visits to Austin and was able to access these records. The curator of the institution was very kind to us as a film crew. And I had the honor of actually joining her about the 2.5, 3 months she was down there, off and on over the course of 9 months. I joined her for 3 days and saw what she was going through and the records. I mean, this is what the defense counsel, through a discovery process, was able to put together. Unfortunately, the trial only lasted 3.5 weeks, so they weren't able to present a lot of this evidence. And it was by the efforts of Judge Maish, who was the presiding judge. He put a lot of these records under seal, was never allowed to present to the defense or to the jury or the prosecution. The prosecution wasn't even aware of the records. So it was a very stunted and very unfortunate set of events on that short trial.
So what does this evidence amount to?
I mean, these are all good points, too. Not just the length of the trial, but the length of the initial investigation. When you have with these alleged false flags and all of this, the one commonality is they all know who did it right away, and they closed the book really quick. Whereas in all of these other investigations and events, I mean, you have this going on for months, for years, of them trying to figure it all out. But in certain events, it's as if there's a script and it's just being followed. Again, not alleging that everybody's in on it, the script, only the string pullers at the top. But they just don't allow this investigation to even match what a normal one would look like. Because I guess it would take too long. It'd be forgotten from public memory. They wouldn't be able to accomplish what they want to accomplish with the two-way restrictions, etc., if they drag it out for years and years and years, like organic events.
Are these claims true? Until McVeigh's full defense records are unsealed, or witnesses like Nichols and Hammer are deposed and their testimony investigated by a grand jury, researchers will have to rely on evidence in the public record to corroborate these claims and arrive at a better understanding of the bombing and McVeigh's role in it. We do know that in August of 1993, director Bill Bean recorded some footage of Camp Grafton, a National Guard training center that provided explosives and demolitions training, while scouting locations for a film shoot. While filming at Camp Grafton, 1.5 years after McVeigh's supposed discharge from the Army, Bean had an encounter with a man he now firmly believes to have been McVeigh.
So what's your job?
What was that?
What's your job?
Oh, parts clerk.
Oh, you just parking this one, huh?
Yeah, basically.
Hi, my name is Bill Bean. I work in the film industry. On August 3rd, 1993, I was at Camp Grafton, North Dakota. Camp Grafton is a military training academy for the United States Army, the Army Reserve, and the National Guard. The reason I was there was to scout locations for a film project I was working on. I was given a tour of the base. It's designated by Colonel Dahl. We were by the motor pool, and there were a large group of tanks that were parked there. I saw 2 soldiers parking an armored vehicle. I asked the billeting director if I could go over and interview the soldiers. So I walked over to the armored vehicle. It had a porthole in the back. I entered inside. The soldier who had been driving the vehicle was closing a hatch in the front. When he turned around, he looked at me and he froze. I had my video camera running, and I said to him, "What's your job?" And he looked at me and he said, "What?" I said, "What's your job?" He says, "I'm nobody. I'm just a parts clerk." On August 3rd, 1993, is when I videotaped and interviewed Timothy McVeigh a year and a half after he was supposedly out of the military completely.
So what do the coincidence theorists make of this? If this is not McVeigh, then who is it, and why has this person never been identified?
So what's your job?
What was that?
What's your job?
I'm a parts clerk.
Oh, you're just parking this one, huh?
Yeah, basically.
Was McVeigh involved in explosives training at Camp Grafton after his supposed discharge? Camp Grafton denies that McVeigh was ever present on base, but beyond the physical resemblance to McVeigh, Professor Michael Blomgren of the University of Utah conducted a voice analysis of the tape and found an 86% match between the person speaking on the tape and audio of McVeigh's interview on 60 Minutes.
I ended up going to Professor Blomgren at the University of Utah, who's in the speech pathology department. He did a voice forensics test. He did various computer and scientific tests on it, and did human voice analysis tests also. His final report to me was that he would testify in a court of law that this is Timothy McVeigh. He had compared it to a 60 Minutes interview and found a near-perfect, near-exact match.
This footage is possible corroboration of McVeigh's story, but it is only that.
Well, what I find the most curious, like, let's say it's not him. They can't identify who that was. They know the exact date and time this was recorded at this base. So if it's not McVeigh, who is it? Like, it's not like there's millions of soldiers at that particular base. I mean, we're talking hundreds or a couple thousand. Like, how many are dead ringers from McVeigh, and they can't identify a single one? Not just dead ringers facially, but vocally. Curious. What's the coincidence theorist explanation here? I just haven't heard one. You know, maybe it's not him, but what is the coincidence theorist cope here? I mean, if it really, like, is there even a guy who is plausible to be this, who is this if it's not McVeigh? Like, what? Like, you would think it's not that hard to figure it out. I mean, we have an exact date, time, location.
Possible corroboration. What else can we find on the public record that helps to back up this fantastic tale of McVeigh as a sheep-dipped Special Forces operative? Let's start by examining Nichols' declaration. In it, Nichols, fearing for the safety of his family, notes, "I cannot possibly discuss in this declaration all the information I have concerning the Oklahoma City bombing and others involved, but crucial parts of this terrorist act remain hidden from the American people, especially the identities of the others unknown who collaborated with McVeigh in the bombing."
So it's kind of curious that, you know, some of these retard maxing judges, if they're not corrupt, and I'm not alleging that all the judges are corrupt. I know a lot of people, like coincidence theorists and statist bootlickers, they love to spam these false dichotomies. Either everybody's in on it, or there's no conspiracy. Like, this, the level of mental disability of statists is just weird. But, I mean, again, I'm not alleging the judges are in on it. The judges, and so people I don't know, for some reason people think judges are just so intelligent. Like, have you watched some videos of these trials or just interviews with judges? I mean, they're pretty dumb. I mean, most people are pretty dumb. Now, I don't know if they're completely mentally disabled, but you know, they might full well understand that there is, like, they're not in it. Let's, again, thought experiment. I'm not claiming anything's true or untrue. For the sake of argument, just for a moment, let's say they're not in on it. But they're not completely brain dead. I mean, maybe, yeah, they're dumb, but they're not completely brain dead. So they know that, they fully well know that there could possibly be evidence of this. But they don't want to open up Pandora's box. They know that people end up dead for opening Pandora's box. So even though they're not in on it, even though they might not know what the truth actually is, they don't have the security clearances and they weren't involved in any of this, and there was probably no order even given from above under this thought experiment. And when he says this, they just dismiss it and say, oh, well, there's no evidence of it. Even though they know full well this might be a possibility, they shut it down anyway, not because they're in on it, but simply because they are mentally weak traitors to their oaths for justice. That's all it is. Just basic self-preservation of cowardly judges. Or, of course, they are in on it, or they're not in on it, and there was an order given from above. But even if there wasn't, they could still decline to pursue any of this and put the kibosh on it just because they know that it's very possible this is true.
Nichols goes on to reveal the name of one of these collaborators. After noting McVeigh seemed upset and angry in learning about a change in targets for the bombing, Nichols writes that, in what I believe was an accidental slip of the tongue, McVeigh revealed the identity of a high-ranking FBI official who was apparently directing McVeigh in the bomb plot. The name McVeigh let slip was Larry Potts, lead FBI agent at Ruby Ridge.
So here's the thing. Like, why would this guy be lying? So this guy, I mean, I don't know. Is he just trying to muddy the waters by saying that? Or, because again, MKUltra programming is not perfect, and we're going to examine all of that and more. But you can kind of see it in the fracturing of the psyche. For example, in Hollyweird, like you have Operation Mockingbird, and you have MKUltra, various brainwashing techniques. And a lot of these Hollyweird entertainers, by the mid to late 20s, or definitely by the 30s, the psyche fractures. Now, I don't know what kind of updates have been made to the MKUltra programming, but the main programming that we discussed in the 9.5-hour episode of Receipts for Satanic Ritual Abuse, etc., is a lot of these MKUltra programming methodologies involve like extreme abuse and all of this, which fractures the psyche, so there's multiple personalities, etc., that's never fully rectified, and they can only maintain the programming for X period of years. And that's why all of these Hollyweird people have these mental breakdowns later in life, especially like the child stars, because the programming doesn't hold indefinitely. And there's cracks all along the way.
According to Nichols, McVeigh was furious with Potts for changing the script on the bombing and, presumably, targeting the Murrah building. So, who is Larry Potts? Larry Potts was described as the Bureau's fastest rising star in the early 1990s, and as such was in the center of the Bureau's two most controversial incidents of that time: the Ruby Ridge shootout in which Vicki Weaver and her 14-year-old son were killed by federal agents, and the Waco standoff that ended with federal agents burning down the Branch Davidian compound, killing 76 men, women, and children. In May of 1995, directly after the Oklahoma City bombing, he was promoted to Deputy Director of the FBI, where he was Chief Operating Officer in charge of hundreds of criminal investigations. He was also the lead investigator on the bombing of the Murrah building. So do we have any evidence that the FBI participated in a cover-up of the OKC investigation? The answer is such a resounding yes that even high-ranking FBI officials have alleged just such a cover-up.
We know there were 24 people that were interviewed by the FBI that said they saw Mr. McVeigh on April 19th with someone else, and they had no reason to make it up. They didn't have a dog in that fight. They didn't have any reason to make something up. They told the agents exactly what they saw, and the agents wrote it down. If only one person had seen it, or two or three, but 24 people say, yes, I saw him with somebody else. That's pretty powerful.
Yeah, so 24 people, that's not hundreds like in Columbine, but it's still, yeah, 24 is not one or two mistaken people. That's 24 people. I mean, that's interesting. That's very convenient for the mainstream media to never repeat, or was there even a fair trial here? Was there even a fair trial?
That Danny Coulson, the man in charge of the FBI's collection of evidence from the Oklahoma City bombing, is himself alleging a cover-up, is significant. As Coulson points out, in the immediate wake of the bombing, the largest manhunt in the history of the Bureau was launched to find the two men who were reported as having rented and driven the Ryder truck to its destination. John Doe number 1 was soon identified as McVeigh, but John Doe number 2, his accomplice, remained at large.
Who is John Doe number 2, and where is he? Employees at the truck rental business in Kansas also helped with a sketch of a man who they say was with McVeigh, a square-jawed suspect with a tattoo on his left arm. Authorities made a second, then a third sketch of John Doe 2 with a ball cap, based on a description from an Oklahoma City man who says he gave McVeigh and John Doe 2 directions to Northwest 5th and Harvey, the Murrah building, 30 minutes before the bombing. So he pulls up and what?
Wait, did anybody catch that? So the building that they had already scoped out and they had already picked, they needed and they have all the maps and everything in their possession. They ask somebody for directions 30 minutes before. I mean, this is almost like a comedy script. I mean, who's buying this stuff? I'm not saying it didn't happen. But does anybody find it kind of weird? The guys that are, like, he already scoped, like, this target was picked. They already had it all done. They had been there before. They had scoped it all up. And now on the day of, suddenly they forgot where it was?
Gets out of the truck.
No, he pulls up and I go up to the truck. I went to see what he needed. He said he was kind of lost a little bit. He said he was looking for 5th and Harvey, was the words he gave me. He did not distinct a building, the Murrah building or nothing like that. He just asked me where direction of 5th and Harvey was. I kind of tried to explain it to him verbally, and he could seem a little confused by the way I was explaining it to him. So at that time, he got out of the truck, and I kind of walked him about 3 or 4 feet from where we were standing and pointed it out to him, the direction where it was.
Now, all these accounts share a common and unsettling similarity. The witnesses say they saw several accomplices, including the infamous John Doe number 2. ATF officials tell us the elusive John Doe is still part of this case, but will not comment any further. However, they did tell us that there's a lot about this case we don't know yet.
This also reminds me of, like, the people in fatigues that were captured via helicopter footage running away from the Connecticut incident and then never brought up again, or at 9/11. There was numerous vans stopped with suspects and explosives, etc., and then never brought up ever again. I mean, it's kind of funny, and that does point. There's one of two things here. Some people allege this is all revelation of the method. So the powers that be are just, they reveal the truth, then they point and laugh at all the goofs who just believe the official narrative anyway. Or, I mean, let's not fall for false dichotomies. There could be more than one thing being accomplished here, including revelation of the method. But even if it's not revelation of the method, it kind of goes to show what one of my theories is. I don't think everybody's in on it. I think there's honest journalists, and they're repeating what they believe to be the truth. And then there might be some honest law enforcement out there also who are trying to, do the right thing before they get shut down. And so these initial reports are simply that. People actually honestly trying to do their job before, the mass cover-up kicks into gear. Is that what this was here?
Information you can't find in the indictments against Timothy McVeigh, Terry Nichols, and Michael Fortier.
The first man is of medium build with a light brown crew cut, and he is right-handed.
McVeigh is identified as the mystery man John Doe 1 and arrested.
The second man is also medium build. He's further described as 5 feet 9 inches to 5 feet 10 inches tall, with brown hair and a tattoo visible on his left arm.
What happens next?
What kind of tattoo? Take to be a little bit more specific, unless it's some super generic and they couldn't really tell. It was, I don't know, back then it was like the barbed wire on the bicep. Was that like a super popular one, or on the forearm, or just some kind of tribal, very generic tribal tattoo visible on the left arm? It doesn't even say upper arm or forearm, which is kind of weird. It's probably just, I guess if they saw it from a decent distance, maybe just a very generic tattoo on the upper left arm. But yeah, look at all this fair use going on as we examine this report here. A lot of mind-shocking revelations here that nobody wants to talk about regarding this case. Why is that?
Is a conspiracist's dream.
John Doe number 2 remains at large. He should be considered armed and extremely dangerous.
But 2 months later, the FBI calls off the search. The official line is, John Doe 2 doesn't exist.
I mean, isn't that kind of weird? So, like, all these people are all wrong, so 24 plus people. All wrong. This guy doesn't even exist at all? Not that it was Nichols or somebody, or they identified them. This was all... These are not the drones you're looking for. There's simply no other guy. I mean, again, is this all humiliation ritual? I mean, I've postulated that in a lot of these public events, like 9/11, the Connecticut incident, part of the humiliation ritual is just laughing at all the goofs who have no critical thinking abilities and simply believe the official narrative.
Why was the manhunt called off? Why were 24 separate eyewitnesses along the Ryder truck's route that morning dismissed as having imagined his existence? Is it because even more damning evidence of John Doe number 2's existence, and more importantly his identity, was about to emerge?
It was just hours after the bombing when the news channel first told you about the possibility that surveillance cameras may have captured the explosion and the killers on tape. Our sources and sources for the LA Times describe what's actually on those tapes. The information shows some huge surprises, the biggest that it may have been John Doe number 2. Not Timothy McVeigh, who detonated the bomb.
Oh, wow. I totally forgot. This actually aired? This is crazy. So they actually made a report before all this got disappeared and vanished. Interesting. Interesting. Again, why would they report this if they were in on the conspiracy? It sounds like everything kind of got activated once an organic investigation was leading to the identity of this guy.
Brad Edwards has the latest on the investigation in this exclusive News Channel report.
Fair use, obviously, here on this news footage. Look at all this fair use going on.
Our new information comes directly from a source that has seen parts of those surveillance tapes. It also comes from reports now in the Los Angeles Times. But perhaps the biggest surprise is contained in the news channel's own information. Timothy McVeigh was not the last person to leave the Ryder truck. In fact, another man sat inside the cab of the truck after McVeigh got out. We believe that man is John Doe number 2, a man who, for all we know, is still on the loose, leaving open a vital question. Was it John Doe number 2 who actually set off the bomb, not Timothy McVeigh, as we've all been led to believe? News Channel 4 has for weeks been demanding copies of the surveillance tapes from the FBI. The federal government so far is dragging its feet. But many people in the investigation have seen the tapes, and now so has a source willing to describe to the news channel what the tapes show. The LA Times report shows there was a surveillance camera near the corner of 5th and Harvey and another near the corner of 5th and Robinson. Federal investigators recreated the time sequence leading up to the bombing by matching the video and still photos from the surveillance cameras. Since we can't show you the tape ourselves, we're reenacting what our source says he saw on those tapes. As witnesses told the news channel before, the tapes showed the Ryder truck parked in front of the Murrah building where we now know the blast went off. As witnesses also told us, the tape showed 2 men sitting inside the Ryder truck. A man strongly resembling Timothy McVeigh gets out of the driver's side, steps down. He then appears to have dropped something on the step up into the truck. He bends down and appears to pick something up off the step. Then he turns and walks directly across 5th Street toward the Journal Record building. All this time, John Doe number 2 is still inside the Ryder truck's cab, sitting on the passenger side. Time passes. The surveillance tape is time-lapse photography. Without knowing exactly the time interval between shots, our source can't be sure how long John Doe number 2 sat in that cab. What was he doing all that time? Then the tape shows John Doe number 2 getting out of the passenger side of the Ryder truck. Again.
So I wonder if the judge was even shown this information that said that there were no other accomplices, and like, was this even presented at trial, or did they disappear all of this evidence?
The tape shows that a bombing witness accurately described what happened next to News Channel 4.
I was standing in the building, and I looked out the window, and I seen the Ryder's truck, and I seen the man get out of the Ryder's truck.
The tape shows John Doe number 2 getting out, shutting the passenger side door. He steps toward the front of the truck and is momentarily out of the frame of the surveillance camera. But shortly, he appears back in frame, walking toward the rear of the truck, still on the sidewalk in front of the Murrah building. Again, he turns east toward the front of the truck, looking toward the street. John Doe number 2 then walks diagonally across 5th Street toward the east, as if heading toward the YMCA or the intersection of 5th and Robinson. He again leaves the frame of the camera. Another camera shooting from another angle clearly shows the actual explosion that destroyed the federal building and killed 169 people.
In any normal trial, the footage of the defendant at the scene of the crime with the alleged murder weapon would be the centerpiece of the prosecution. But this was no ordinary trial. Not only did the FBI never produce the surveillance footage in court, they never released it at all.
How bonkers is this? Like, how do bootlickers defend this? So there's a minimum of 2 angles of surveillance footage of the crime in question. Now, was it not even, because some people theorize this, it wasn't even McVeigh in the first place. It was not McVeigh and John Doe number 2. John number 2 would also designate that John Doe number 1 is also still unidentified. But yeah, some people allege it was neither one of them, and they just made sure McVeigh was in the general area driving away to get caught. But whether it is or isn't him as number 1, like, how could you not present the number 1 piece of evidence? And there are goofs, like, are there goofs actually defending this trial? I mean, this is crazy.
Despite multiple sworn affidavits showing that the tapes exist, that they show John Doe number 2, and that the cameras were removed from the scene by the FBI on the day of the bombing, they have still never been shown to the public.
This also reminds me of the Pentagon bombing, or the Pentagon, well, official narrative, the Pentagon plane crash in 9/11, and how the FBI or whoever, agents, government agents, or people pretending to be government agents, went around all the local businesses and gas stations and confiscated all the security tapes. That reminds me of that.
After a years-long court case that continues to this very day, the FBI claim that they have searched their records for the tape, but they just can't find it.
Or the telemetry data from NASA going to the moon. Such records must have been misplaced, misfiled, or hidden. Well, at least they admitted that they were, right? Well, this is a huge revelation. We gotta give brownie points to the FBI here, right? The FBI admitted that they could have been hidden. Now, I guess they didn't admit it that they were the ones who hid it. I guess they didn't admit that they were the ones. But interesting that they kind of revealed the truth there as one of the possibilities. They admitted that could be a possibility.
So why is the FBI so concerned about keeping this footage from the public? It shows 2 things which could completely change our understanding of what happened on April 19th, 1995. The first is the possibility that the Ryder truck bomb was not the only bomb at the Murrah building that day.
The first bomb that was in the federal building did go off. It did the damage that you see right there. The second explosive was found and diffused. The third explosive that was found, and they are working on right now as we speak, I understand, both the second and third explosives, if you can imagine this, were larger than the first.
So again, like in most cases, in most events of all kind, even like 9/11, like the early reports are a lot different than official narrative. The earlier reports are more likely to be true in any case, anywhere. Again, a detail the coincidence theorists never want to seem to address.
That they have found a second explosive device of some kind inside this building.
Justice Department is reporting that a second explosive device has been found.
One device was deactivated. Apparently there's another device.
That in fact 2 different explosive devices were found in addition to the one that went off.
A second bomb was found on the east side of that building. A bomb squad is on the scene.
The medical teams downtown are unable to get into the wreckage to retrieve more of the injured because of the presence of other bombs in the area.
I just took a look down the street at the Morrow building again. I see another bomb truck going, so apparently they're going to try to get out that third bomb that's been talked about.
As retired U.S. Air Force Brigadier General Ben Pardon noted in an exhaustive report in the wake of the bombing, the evidence is conclusive that the Ryder truck bomb could not have accounted for the damage done to the Murrah building.
I went to a 2-year graduate program, 8 quarters of armament engineering graduates, the first course that was ever set up. And after that, I worked at the Ballistic Research Laboratories at Aberdeen, which was 2 years of hands-on work designing, developing continuous rod warhead for the Bomark missile and other weapon systems. Well, the truck bomb, even though it was fairly massive, was somewhat removed from some of the structures that were damaged. They clearly had some what you call broussance damage, where the blast pressure was way above what you would expect to get from the truck at that distance.
I mean, that's a good point. See, like with the WTC, like they were trying to park it right under the building in the garage, whereas here it's parked on the street in, a decent distance from the building itself. So that is curious. Just the basic physics of this is very curious. Very curious. And shout out to all the government employees who, apparently have some kind of honor and integrity, and they're not willing to go along with the false narrative, and they go on the record. Yeah, very interesting.
Broussance damage is that caused by an explosive whose blast wave is powerful enough to shatter and destroy the material affected. The problem with the failed columns at the Murrah building is at that distance, the air blast from an anvil bomb would have been 10 times less powerful than what was needed to dissolve the concrete and cut the rebar. Those columns, had they failed due to air blast, should have broken with sharp chunks of concrete connected by rebar, not sheared off at critical points. Broussance damage indicates contact explosives placed directly on the beams. Even more perplexing is the total collapse of column B3, which caused the floors on the east side to pancake onto one another. The building was gutted to within feet of the other side. Column B4, closer to the truck bomb, is completely intact. Yet we are supposed to believe that a blast wave traveled through B4, leaving the sheetrock almost untouched, and completely destroyed the column farther away.
Yeah, this kind of physics-denying goofery, I mean, they 10x'd it for 9/11, right? But I think part of the humiliation ritual for all, like, the peons, the bootlickers, the Stockholm Syndrome statists, they're going to believe whatever's on the idiot box. They'll totally believe that the blast from the bomb magically teleported through one column, completely not affecting it, and then destroying a column behind it. I mean, look at what the goofs believe about the alleged nuclear bombs at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you haven't checked out the MINDSHOCK coverage on that, I mean, you have one building completely unaffected next to another building, as if there was a mass wave of damage. I mean, you have wooden structures, like flimsy wooden structures, completely unaffected. Like, just the goofery of the masses to just believe whatever the official narrative states. I mean, that's just, it's the bootlicker cope is just insane. Though, is there any amount of physics violations that the coincidence theorists will not gobble up, unquestioningly? kind of weird, but it's almost like the Oklahoma City event was like a warm-up for 9/11 because they kind of wanted to see the public's reaction to just ludicrous narratives, because they ramped it up like crazy for 9/11, and then, of course, for the Connecticut incident.
And most of the front columns were destroyed when the supporting header beam failed, but the cause of failure, supposedly being air blast, should have thrown it into the building. Instead, it fell straight down and rolled towards the crater. General Parton's report was conclusive. The Murrah Federal Building was not destroyed by one sole truck bomb. The major factor in its destruction appears to have been detonation of explosives carefully placed at 4 critical junctures on supporting columns within the building. Many independent experts concurred with the Parton report. Sam Cohen, inventor of the neutron bomb, issued this statement: "I believe that the demolition charges in the building that were placed inside at certain key concrete columns did the primary damage to the Murrah Federal Building. It would have been absolutely impossible and against the laws of nature for a truck full of fertilizer and oil, no matter how much was used, to bring the building down." The FBI put all their weight behind the lone bomber theory and tailored the evidence to fit that scenario. Dr. Frederick Whitehurst, a supervisor at the FBI crime lab, turned whistleblower over the Bureau's handling of the evidence in the Oklahoma City bombing.
Released a report today condemning the FBI crime lab for mishandling evidence and for slanting its analysis. The report is expected to specifically criticize the lab's handling of the Oklahoma City and World Trade Center bombing cases. It was the allegations of FBI whistleblower Frederick Whitehurst that sparked that investigation.
Forced to resign, Dr. Whitehurst testified in Terry Nichols' trial that a fellow FBI chemist had changed his findings and lied under oath after meeting with federal prosecutors.
So even if the judge doesn't have orders from above, clearly these judges are all corrupt and incompetent because, they don't care about the truth or justice.
The Office of the Inspector General, or OIG, investigated Whitehurst's charges and issued a report which concluded that the FBI crime lab had improperly identified the characteristics of ANFO, the weight of the bomb, the detonation system, and even what kind of explosive was used.
But perhaps even more importantly...
Wait, the Justice Department openly disclosed that? They didn't even identify the correct explosive. I mean, just the level of go free. Again, is this just humiliation ritual? Because they know the peons will just believe that McVeigh's guilty no matter what, and solely guilty. It's just weird.
The missing surveillance tapes from the Murrah building threatened to reveal the identity of John Doe No. 2. And as it turns out, there is every reason to believe that the missing accomplice in the case is, exactly as McVeigh himself alleged, a government informant, agent, or operative. Documents obtained under the Freedom of Information Act over the past decade have exposed a long-classified FBI operation from the early 1990s. This operation, dubbed PATCON for Patriot Conspiracy, involved FBI infiltration of the militia movement, including the very circles that McVeigh himself, model soldier and Special Forces recruit, was now moving in. Attorney Jesse Trenadu has been one of the most outspoken voices about the PATCON operation and how it relates to the events in Oklahoma City.
As I pursued this over the last 16 years and lots of lawsuits and fights with the FBI, I stumbled across an operation that the FBI called PATCON, P-A-T-C-O-N. PATCON was an acronym for Patriot Conspiracy. Mm-hmm. And the FBI began to distance itself from PATCON when I was probing, and they said it was just a simple operation where they were going to infiltrate some militia folks in Alabama who had stolen some night vision goggles from a military base and were selling them. But it was clear to me that PATCON was bigger than that, much, much bigger. And there were PATCON operations going on all over the country. And they referred to them as PATCON Group 1, PATCON Group 2, PATCON Group 3.
PATCON, meaning that's the FBI's name for their wide-scale, you say, investigation and infiltration of the radical right in the early, mid-1990s.
And apparently it went throughout the 90s because here last summer I received a phone call from a fellow who said, I been seeing what's been posted on the internet from your FOIA lawsuits with the FBI. And he said, you have all the pieces, but you just haven't put them together. And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, you just don't see the picture. And so he came to see me, and I directed him to Newsweek magazine and to some other reporters. He had been one of the top undercover operatives for the FBI in PATCON for almost 10 years. He had infiltrated some 23 groups. He started out believing it was the right thing. He wasn't, so many of these informants are people who are caught in the act of committing a crime and are forced to go undercover for the FBI. He did it voluntarily because he thought these hate groups, what described him as hate groups, were dangerous. In hindsight, he said he looked back on it and he sees now that the agenda was to infiltrate and incite the militia movement, the right-wing Christian movement, the violence, so that the Department of Justice could crush them. He said that Ruby Ridge was a PATCON operation. He said that Waco was a PATCON operation. He believed that Oklahoma City was, but he wasn't involved in it. But he did say that other members of the PATCON group were involved in Oklahoma City.
At the center of the many threads of this operation was Elohim City, a white supremacist compound in Oklahoma whose chief of security was the enigmatic Andreas Strassmeyer, son of former German Chancellor Helmut Kohl's chief of staff and a former lieutenant in the German army with military intelligence training. And we have another angle on this as well from Carol Howe. Are you familiar with her case?
She was actually hired by the ATF to infiltrate the compound in Elohim City, which was in eastern Oklahoma, almost right on the Arkansas border. And they gave her ordnance, they gave her pipe bomb material, everything to just find out if the people within Elohim City were, capable of actually doing something, such as the Oklahoma City bombing. And come to find out, there was ATF and FBI informants that she didn't even know about. So it was really an odd mix of informants. They're not communicating with each other. Catastrophic breakdown in communication.
I gave them warnings, targets, specific targets, addresses of targets, names of targets. I know of too many people that were talking about that building.
And what's curious, again, like the coincidence theorist bootlicker Cope, as if the government wouldn't infiltrate groups and incite action so they can take action against the groups. Again, some believe this is what happened January 6th, etc. And all the brain-dead gophs just hallucinate that this would never be done, despite there's a long history of false flags and spies. I mean, this is just basic spycraft, right? This is absolutely basic spycraft. But for some reason, coincidence theorists, they just can't grasp these simple concepts, and they need their safety blanket of statism is good and never does anything bad, despite having, like, the highest death toll in history.
Talking about Oklahoma City. Talking about doing something on that date using a truck bomb.
In her report to the ATF in December, Howe reveals that Strassmeyer planned to forcibly act to destroy the U.S. government with assassinations, mass shootings, and bombings.
He said he wanted to go blow up federal buildings. I mean, just point blank, that's what he said he'd like to be out there doing.
Jane Graham, an eyewitness who worked in the Murrah building.
Yeah, TJ in the chat asking, is there a conspiracy theory that McVeigh has a doppelganger that is in the U.S. government as of right now? They could be the same person? Yes. We'll be going into that as well. That one's really wild. Darth Mocker says 12 of the 14 guys in the Whitmare kidnapping were feds. Yeah, it's weird, like coincidence theorists, for whatever reason, they just don't have the mental capacity to just comprehend the basics of spycrafts and double agents. Like, they watch all these Hollywood movies where people are double agents or even triple agents. So, presumably, the mental capacity would be there to understand the concept. But it's like, as soon as they turn on the idiot box, whatever's on the news has to be true. Like, the mental capacity is just not there, even though it might be there in understanding a movie.
Observed Strassmeyer in the building the week before the bombing, going over blueprints and carrying what looked to be the components for C4 explosives and detonators.
I mean, wow, this is damning evidence. I mean, this is just like 9/11, right? Like with the arts, the Israeli art students in the building. George Bush's cousin or whatever in charge of the security, the never before evacuation of WTC like 2 weeks beforehand, where they could have done whatever they wanted in there. Just the goofery from the coincidence theorists and the bootlickers and hallucinating. All of this is irrelevant. I mean, it's just wild, especially post-COVID.
As alleged in David Hoffman's book, The Oklahoma City Bombing and the Politics of Terror, Strassmeyer first aroused suspicion that he was an undercover operative when he was caught in Texas entering a federal building at night with a key code. Did he have access to the Murrah building also?
When we interviewed Jane Graham, who was a survivor, she said that when she went to work, it was either the day before or 2 days before, I don't remember which, she parked in the basement parking, and when she got out of her car and was walking across the parking garage, she saw 3 guys down there wearing coveralls and placing putty on the columns and stringing wire between the putty. Later, she picks out one of the guys from photographs and says, that's him, and it was Andreas Strassmeyer.
Strassmeyer was there listening, going over the plans. He was listening to everything. He was, what they were talking about, looking at place, pointing to things. But when they were talking, whatever they happened to finally be talking about, and when I was looking at him, at that point, then he left and went over to the other side of the building so I wouldn't keep watching him. The second man that was there, who appeared to be military, he's the one that the man in charge told to put the stuff back in the car. The second man obviously was taking orders from the first man because he had wire in his hands, which I thought was telephone wire. It's that real light color, thin wire. And he also had what appeared to be gray putty.
Well, that's exactly how you string composition C4 with det cord.
Despite all of this evidence, Strassmeyer was never interviewed by the FBI as part of their Oklahoma City investigation before he had the chance to flee the country and return to Germany. This is just one of many examples of seeming foreknowledge of the attack that have since been covered up or suppressed by the FBI and the ATF.
The government has claimed that they had absolutely no prior warning, and yet we start off with the interesting little episode where 2 Air Force bomb squad guys, and these are very special Air Force bomb squad guys that we know were cleared to work for presidential security, VIP security, and so on. They were ordered from Kirtland Air Force Base in New Mexico to Oklahoma City, arriving on Monday the 17th of April, 2 days before the bombing. Their orders were to go to a motel and wait there until contacted by the FBI. I had become aware of this information in 1997, developed some confirming information, but the key was that in the summer of 2001, 2 journalists had separate conversations with one of the 2 individuals on this bomb squad team. He admitted he was there. When asked in separate conversations by both journalists why he was there, he responded, "You'll have to ask the FBI."
There was this fairly large truck with a trailer behind it, and it had a shield on the side of the door, and it said bomb disposal or bomb squad below it.
Authorities now claim in federal investigative reports that the huge, ominous truck with its trailer was being used by a deputy to run routine errands. Other documents obtained by 2020 show that someone called the Executive Secretariat's office at the Justice Department in Washington and said the Murrah building had been bombed. But this was 24 minutes before the blast.
I mean, this is kind of hard to write off as just all innocent mistakes. It's almost like revelation of the method and humiliation ritual after the fact, just like, Building 7 collapsing before it collapsed, being reported as before it collapsed. Yeah, it's just like a combo of revelation of the method plus humiliation ritual to laugh at the goofs that just believe that this is all coincidental or innocent anomalies that have nothing to do with anything. You have the bomb squad there before the bombing? doing routine checks. See, I want to know, like, if they do a daily routine check at that same time, or even not at the time, okay, that's fine. I mean, that's not a coincidence, because that's something they do every day. If they do it once a year, and this was the day they do it, I mean, well, that's 1/365th. If they never do it, or they do it once every 5 years, I mean, so I worked nearby a federal building. I've never once seen a bomb squad vehicle, and I wasn't particularly watching the building the whole time. I do wonder, has anybody ever worked in a federal building? How often does a bomb squad truck go by? Either now, in the 90s, whenever. Because for some reason, I don't think they daily, like, if they do daily bomb sweeps, maybe they do that, but I don't think they disclose that, and I don't think they're going to park a bomb, I don't know if they park a bomb squad truck right next to it while they do that. Does anybody know? For some reason, I'm skeptical of that. Call me crazy, but I'm skeptical.
No action was apparently taken.
Yet another witness, a rescue worker, says after she talked with an agent at the bombing scene, she also suspected the ATF was warned and agents stayed away from their office that morning.
I asked him if his office was in the building, and he said yes. And I asked if there were any ATF agents that were still in the building, and he said no, we weren't here.
Again, just like 9/11, like supposedly like the majority, like so many people were not there that day, including people that had never missed work before. But for whatever reason, that particular day on 9/11, they weren't there. It's almost like a replay, right? Everything from like making up magic physics that all the goofs believe, from the people not being there, from like the mysterious, just coincidental bomb planting prior to what the event that they allege brought down the building that obviously didn't bring down the building. I mean, it's like deja vu all over again.
Witness number one approached an ATF agent nearby. He claims he asked the agent what had happened, and witness number one says this is what the agent told him.
He started getting a little bit nervous. He tried reaching somebody on a two-way radio. Couldn't get anybody, and I told him I wanted an answer right then. He said they were in debriefing. None of the agents had been in there. They had been tipped by their pagers not to come into work that day. Plain as day out of his mouth. They were tipped. Why wasn't anybody else?
Any one of these indications of foreknowledge of the blast would be incredible enough. Taken together, they provide corroboration of the thesis that the government in fact had informants in the plot and were allowing it to go ahead. But more startling by far than all of these accusations is the case of Dipole Might. Dipole Might was an ATF project to familiarize BATF agents with truck bomb debris patterns and to calibrate the effect of vehicular explosions on a variety of materials and structures. Beginning in 1994, the Bureau conducted a series of experiments at the White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico, blowing up vehicles with C4 and ANFO explosives and analyzing the blasts to gauge the effect of terrorist bombings on government buildings. Even more incredible, pictures emerged in 1997 of a Ryder truck parked at Camp Gruber Training Center in Oklahoma. The source of the image, who feared for his safety and requested anonymity, asserted that the images were taken in early April of 1995, just 2 weeks before the bombing. The National Guard did eventually confirm that the images were authentic, and that the Ryder truck's presence at the camp was related to a weapons sensor project connected with the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, but issued a statement insisting that this Ryder truck and the weapons project it was associated with, quote, had no association whatsoever with the tragedy at the Alfred P. Murrah building.
This is really curious. Again, is this part of the humiliation ritual? Because why would they say it had no association whatsoever? Like, how would they know? Like, if there is some kind of spy and they don't know about it, how would they know there was no association? But what's weird is that they corroborated the images as legitimate, because what coincidence theorists, bootlicker goofs, they always say, oh, well, that's fake. That's even before AI. They were like, oh, that's all fake. Anything Anything that questions the official narrative has to be crazy by these tinfoil people, etc. But here there's admission that these photos are real. And also the spin that it has no association whatsoever. Not no association. No association whatsoever. And if this was above the pay grade of the National Guard, right? Like if this is some kind of top secret, it would be above the National Guard's top clearance of whoever's, so they wouldn't know. Even if it did have an association, the National Guard might not be looped in, so they wouldn't know whether it did or it didn't, yet they're still releasing the statement that it didn't. The goofery here, the goofery.
End quote. Could this be the other Ryder truck that witnesses reported seeing at Lake Geary several days before Timothy McVeigh and Terry Nichols arrived to construct their bomb?
The official narrative dictates that Tim McVeigh alone rented the Ryder truck in Junction City, Kansas on April 17, 2 days before the bombing. He and Terry Nichols supposedly constructed the bomb on April 18. But the bulk of eyewitness accounts assert that the Ryder truck was at Geary Lake for several days before that.
I retired April 11th, 1995, and after finishing up that morning, I decided to stop by here and fish at Geary State Lake, which is right in this general area here that I was fishing from, the pier or jetty, and I stayed here most of the afternoon fishing, of course, with no luck. And later on that afternoon, I had decided to maybe go back over this way over here to the other point back there and see if I'd have any luck. When I noticed a Ryder truck over there. I was sitting at home one day and my wife came in from work and she said that she had been stopped in a roadblock up here at Geary Lake in reference to the Oklahoma City bombing and the making of the bomb here at Geary State Lake and with a Ryder truck. And I said, well, you know, I had told you about the Ryder truck I had seen there before this. And that's how I became aware of it. And then the next thing I knew, she told the ATF and FBI, the people at the roadblock, that what I had seen. And before I knew it, my house was swarming with agents.
Multiple trucks, multiple bombs, government informants, prior warnings, Pat Kahn, John Doe No. 2, Andreas Strassmeyer. The indications of government participation and cover-up in the bombing itself continue to mount and mount, and they paint a very different picture of McVeigh than that of the lone wolf bomber that the government and media have spent 20 years asking us to believe in. But why? If there was government complicity in the plot to blow up the Murrah building, why would this be so? What would the government stand to gain from this? Firstly, PatCon gained its objective of discrediting militias, gun rights groups, and those concerned about governmental overreach once and for all in the mind of the American public.
The United States of America, they believe that the United States government is prepared to usurp the Constitution and break down doors and confiscate guns. Am I lying to these people, Bob Fletcher?
Well, this aged terribly. Who remembers Hurricane Katrina?
And Jim Trockman?
John Trockman.
John, sorry, it says John here. You believe this?
No, not quite like that. Not the U.S. government.
Which government? The one world government?
Yes, sir.
The United Nations?
Yes, sir.
And you're in the woods now, and you're not, neither of you, you're not in the woods?
No.
Yeah, you're from Montana, the city of Noxon?
Yes, sir. The little town of Noxon.
350 people?
Maximum.
Aha. And you living in the woods?
No.
No, you're not. Is anybody in Montana?
Just their plain homes.
You're sitting next to Ray Southwell, who does, from Michigan. You gather in the woods, don't you? In Michigan?
When we train?
Yeah.
That's correct.
But you're not living there.
What is this goof's obsession with people living in the woods? Like, you have a problem with, like, Walden Pond? Or, like, what is this guy's animosity towards nature? It's kind of weird. Does he think people are going to think they're crazy if they're hermits living in the woods? Like, what kind of goof is this?
I don't quite understand when you say living there. I live in northern Michigan,
And I have 20 acres that I live on, and there's a house there.
Right.
Does that guy have like a mental disability? As if living in the woods is a bad thing? Like, what is wrong with that goof?
Secondly, an ATF that had suffered a severe backlash from its mishandling of events at Ruby Ridge and Waco could win public support and sympathy by parading as the victim of anti-government crazies. Thirdly, it provided new life to the Omnibus Counterterrorism Act of 1995, a controversial bill introduced by Joe Biden 2 months before the bombing that...
Oh, this Joe Biden goof is involved here. That's interesting. That's interesting. And let's not, let's not forget his article here. How I learned to love the New World Order here. Wall Street Journal, April 23rd, 92. By Joseph R. Biden Jr. The One World Government, the New World Order.
Would have given police broad new powers to use secret sources and secret evidence in terrorism proceedings. Widely denounced as an affront to civil liberties, the bill was languishing in committee. But all that changed on April 19, 1995. The very day after the blast at the Murrah Building, the New York Times wrote about the bill that, after the Oklahoma City bombing, there are few surer legislative bets in Washington. The legislation morphed into the Anti-Terrorism and Effective Death Penalty Act of 1996 and was passed the next year.
What a coincidence. What a coincidence. And you could look at the also gun restrictions regarding the exact models Eric Harris and Dylan Klebold used at Columbine, like that. Was it that week or something? Just the coincidence stack is interesting.
With President Clinton specifically linking the bill to the bombing in his signing statement. Years later, Biden claimed that his original bill was the core of what eventually became the Patriot Act.
Quite damning here. Quite damning. The Patriot Act, which has, snowballed. Like, if some people think that was the snowball effect that has spiraled the collapse of Western civilization.
Fourthly, the bombing also conveniently destroyed a number of documents that were proving to be problematic for the Clinton administration. Documents that had all somehow or other ended up being housed at the Murrah Building in Oklahoma City in April of 1995.
That's another interesting one, too. Just like the missing trillions, but only in the area of the Pentagon that was struck by plane/missile at 9/11. Only that particular area for the missing trillions announced September 10th. I mean, just the coincidence. It's like, it's almost like the MO of a serial killer. They keep doing it the same way, but certain goofs still can't catch on.
Day 1, hour 2 of the bombing, the most significant event that happened is when they said they found other bombs in the building. The second most significant event was that they moved everybody back and held them back. There were still people alive trapped in the building, but they came in with 2 trucks and backed them up to the Murrah Building, and a bunch of these guys dressed in blue jackets with no letters on the back started taking boxes of files out and putting them on this truck.
We were told by a blonde female agent that there were files so serious to the government that until those files were located, there would not be any recovery effort.
If you remember the Whitewater investigation in Arkansas, all the paperwork was stored in the Murrah Building. They had FBI agents over in the fields to the west of the Murrah Building picking up paper almost all day long.
And it was during this time that early in the investigation that I started receiving some various phone calls. One of them was a phone call from Little Rock, Arkansas. The guy said that he was a federal agent. He was not an FBI agent. He was not ATF. But what he did say was during their investigation of the Clintons, on all the drug running that went through Mena, Arkansas, and Lassiter's Ranch and all of that stuff that was going on at the time during Iran-Contra, that those records, when Clinton went to Washington, were transferred from there to the Murrah Building.
But what about McVeigh? What was he?
So that's really curious. The Clinton cover-up going back quite a while. And that's really damning testimony too. Like, they're recovering files before they're allowing a rescue effort to save people's lives. Are there any levels these scum won't stoop to? And is there anything the bootlickers won't defend? I don't know. Welcome, Sandro. Yeah, this is rough.
His role in all of this? Criminal mastermind? Convenient patsy? Unwitting dupe? Or sheep-dipped operative, exactly as he claimed to be? It's at this point that most such investigations would end, with the narrator metaphorically shrugging his shoulders and suggesting that the secrets of the bombing might have gone to the grave with McVeigh himself. But this is not such a story. In fact, there are reasons to believe that McVeigh never actually went to the grave at all.
He told us many times he would vacillate on this issue from time to time, but his main theme was that he was not going to be executed, that the major was going to have someone infiltrate the execution team, and that he would be given drugs that would feign the appearance of death, and he says the CIA and other people use these drugs, and that they would be taken out, and he would be brought, given some type of medication that would counteract the other, and that he would be rewarded for serving his country.
You know what's crazy? Like, who believes that? Like, I mean, let's say that's what they told him, right? Would you trust the government to do that and not just kill you to tie up the loose end? It's kind of weird, right? Like, even if that's what they promised, like, how MK Ultra do you have to be to believe that they would actually deliver on that promise?
And it sounds a little bit far-fetched, but I mean, I've talked to several people who witnessed the execution, including Janie Coverdale, and she doesn't know one way or another whether Tim was executed. He was covered up from toe to neck, and he couldn't see any type of IV lines or anything running into his veins. And so she clearly says that she doesn't know if he was executed or not, and she watched it. So, I don't know if Tim McVeigh is dead.
McVeigh spent much of his time on death row fighting for a very unusual request: to not have an autopsy performed on his body after his execution. Autopsies are standard procedures after federal executions and would have been performed on McVeigh, but his request was granted and no autopsy was ever performed.
I mean, what's weird, though, is, if the fix is in, they could just easily swap an autopsy or have a guy perform an autopsy and check off the wrong things, even if it's not McVeigh, right? Like, they have the reach to easily do that. So, it is kind of weird how they would fight for this anyway, because look at all the other, like, in all the cases, whether they can be known or not, or whatever, where somebody kind of faked their death or whatever, it's kind of like crime lab corruption is easy. That's one of the most common issues in wrongful convictions. It's not that the blood wasn't the perpetrators, it's just they swapped a label in a lab. So doctoring an autopsy report's quite easy. You actually see it in many cases where, or if there's two autopsies, one report is drastically different for them. It wouldn't be easy for them to mark certain boxes in the autopsy report. So I don't really know what to make of this at all.
During the execution itself, one of the eyewitnesses, Susan Carlson of WLSAM radio, reported McVeigh, quote, appeared to be still breathing, or what appeared to be shallow breathing, even after being pronounced dead, and his eyes remained open, end quote. After the execution, prison officials admitted to using a decoy to throw the public off the trail of McVeigh, who was ostensibly transported to a local funeral home and cremated before his ashes were turned over to his attorneys. Perhaps it's appropriate, in a sick way, that we don't even have closure on this, the one part of the OKC bombing story that even the most incredulous have long believed was unquestionable. After all, the only constant in the case is that at every turn, the government has lied about what they know, withheld evidence, and otherwise kept the public in the dark about what really happened that day. Meanwhile, those brave few who have sought to shed light on these issues, or just gotten caught up in the story have ended up with their lives transformed, their reputations shattered, and, in some cases, have lost their lives. All in maintenance of this mystery.
Anti-government extremist.
Is
one man.
Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh.
McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh. Timothy McVeigh.
McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh.
McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh.
Timothy McVeigh at one time a sergeant in the United States Army.
So there you have it. That's the secret life of Timothy McVeigh, put out by a Corbett report. Very interesting. Very interesting. There is another piece of this puzzle here. There's actually a few more. And so this is going to be a series, obviously, but I'm going to do them pretty quick. I might even do the next episode tomorrow. Because I don't want to stretch this out forever. There's a couple episodes. I'm going to do them pretty close to back. There's actually quite a few more major bombshells and rabbit holes here, believe it or not. That was just scratching the surface. But I hope everybody found another edition of the MindShock podcast interesting and informative. If you want to help support the podcast, you can donate to our PayPal. Check the link in the description. Make sure you subscribe, like, and share Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Patreon. You can also become a YouTube member right here on YouTube. Help support the channel that way. This is Bruce McGuire signing off. Catch you guys next time.